Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a regular board meeting for the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District for Saturday, October 9th, 2021. It's 8 a.m. Peter, may we have the roll call, please?
Certainly. Rickert?
Here.
Epstein?
Here.
Schroeder? He might be muted.
No, he's not muted, but he's on. I see his computer.
Okay, and Perot?
Here. Hey, John.
Is John?
He's connecting to audio. John is on. It says connecting to audio, so he is here.
Okay. Eric, do you have any announcements?
Just want to welcome everybody to the regularly scheduled KMPUD board meeting. If you'd like to comment, please use the raise your hand function in Zoom, and all votes will be taken by a roll call.
Okay, thanks. Item 4 is remote teleconference meetings. As we discussed on September 30th, we need to renew our, what is it? What are we renewing? A resolution to declare that there's a state of emergency in the state of California, and that we will continue to authorize remote teleconference meetings for the next 30 days. So we did that on the 30th. There was other discussions, you may recall. Peter brought up matters associated with the community building, but that's down later on the agenda. I would just like to make a suggestion here, and that is that we somehow seek out or decide on a piece of objective data or objective criteria upon which we would say, okay, we no longer need to have remote teleconference meetings.
I think that's a later item in the agenda, Eric.
Okay, well, okay, so.
This is just adopting it so we can meet in November.
Right.
By Zoom.
Okay.
So this is only good for 30 days?
So basically what has to happen is if a meeting occurs within 30 days, you don't have to re-adopt this, but the way our meetings fall, sometimes it's more than 30 days. So this basically is just authorizes us. We're just going to do it every month that the board wants to, just so we're safe. We don't have to do it when it's less than 30 days, but it's just good policy. It'll probably move under consent after this, depending what happens in a later topic. But it's just for 30 days. Or just till the next meeting, Peter, is actually what it is. It's till the next meeting.
Okay.
I thought that last special meeting we had, we said we wanted to extend for this meeting October, and then we would discuss if we needed to do so for November. And so I find out that we have to decide for November before we actually discuss the criteria or whatever.
Bertrand, this doesn't actually decide anything. It just makes it so we could if we wanted to.
Okay.
It does not mandate anything. It's simply,
okay. So
it's ministerial, but we have to do it to be in compliance.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, okay. Well, then is there a motion then to extend?
Just make the finding as a motion to make the finding as listed. I think that would cover.
Is there a motion to make a finding as listed?
This is Bob. I move that we adopt the finding as listed.
Okay, and I'll second that motion, Eric. Roll call, Peter. Thanks.
Sure. Rickert?
Aye.
Epstein?
Aye.
Schroeder?
He's still connecting to audio.
Aye.
Oh, there he is.
Okay, there he is. Perot?
Aye.
Dornbrook, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we moved to item 5, corrections to the agenda or consent calendar. I have two things. One, with regard to the agenda, I'd like to move up items G and H to be a bit earlier in the agenda to follow item D. Just so people know, Eric has a hard stop at 11:30. We may have this meeting done by then, but just in case not, these are items that he really needs to be part of. So I'd like to move those up. The second thing I'd like to do is pull item B, the September 11th regular meeting minutes for the regular meeting of September 11th off the consent, since I cannot vote on that one since I was absent.
Okay, so I'm confused. So, okay, we need to vote without you. That's what you are saying?
Yes, you can vote.
Okay.
We'll vote on A, C, D, E, and F as a group,
Okay.
and then I will drop out on B.
Okay,
Okay.
I think you could just actually abstain from the vote
I
Eric,
think so. I
if you
agree.
wanted.
Well,
But that-
I'd be abstaining from everything else then too.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, if that's true, I wasn't into September 30th.
Okay, so let's pull B and C then and do those separately.
Okay.
Okay, any other corrections to the agenda or consent calendar? If not, let's go on to item 7, written comments from the public.
Eric,
No.
we should probably have a motion to accept the
Oh.
amended agenda.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the corrections to the agenda?
I do move
Dornbrook,
so.
so moved.
Okay.
Peter
Okay.
moved and Bertrand seconded.
Yep.
Peter, roll call.
Rickard,
Aye.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Dornbrook, aye. It's unanimous.
Thanks. Now we can go on to written comments, comments from the audience. This is an opportunity for any people from the public to comment on items not on our agenda.
We have one, Jean Lear.
Okay. Welcome, Jean.
Good morning. I'm Jeannie Lear with Alpine County Redistricting Advisory Commission. It's a big title, but basically, I just wanted to take a few minutes to bring the community up to date with the process for redistricting in Alpine County. The first thing I'd like to say is that we are also grateful and relieved that Kirkwood community is still intact. So we all were thinking of you the whole time. Every 10 years, we redistrict based on census numbers from the federal census. Our commission is putting together maps to readjust the districts according to those population figures. I know there's a lot of question about the population figures because of the pandemic and people moving, and but the numbers are going to be what the numbers are. We don't have those final numbers put into our system yet, but we anticipate that we will have them shortly and be able to produce draft maps, probably a number of draft maps. I sent information up to KMPUD on the meeting dates and also a little bit of a written thing on how the process works. There's also a website on Alpine County government section on the redistricting. So what I'm just doing is encouraging anyone and everyone in the Alpine County portion to participate in our redistricting. Obviously, the same thing is happening with Amador County, so you want to be aware of that as well. Public input is just totally, absolutely encouraged. People can draw their own map and send it in. They can submit comments under the website. They can submit comments in writing to the county clerk. We have a meeting on October 19th at 6 p.m. at the Alpine County Administration Building, and that will be when we probably get the closest look, the first really close look at the maps that will be proposed. So once again, I wish I had more information for you on the actual numbers that we're going to be looking at, but we're going to be moving forward with this, and we really just want to encourage participation and comments by the community on this process.
Okay, well, thank you, Gene. That's very interesting. Thanks very much.
Jean,
And,
do you anticipate any major changes?
I don't anticipate any major changes, but we'll have to take a look at the numbers and see how they work.
Well,
Jean?
thanks for keeping us in touch. We appreciate it.
Certainly. Thank
Jim,
you.
And,
we have a communications meeting coming up soon. I'd very much like to agenda this. Could you contact me so I would know what to put on so we could inform the public? more broadly?
Sure.
It's
Sure.
bepstein@kmpud.com.
Okay, great.
I'd love to follow up with you on this. 'Cause I
Great, will
think
do.
it's not just Alpine County that's changing, but the entire District 4 is likely to move slightly north and less south. So it could be a fairly different district in the next congressional election.
Okay, Gene. Well, thanks very much. And certainly during the Tamarack fire, we were thinking of Markleyville.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been quite the summer.
Yeah, sure has been. Sure has been. Well, thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks for your time.
Okay. All right. Any other comments from the audience?
Yes, Howard Hoffman.
Howard?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So for the item 10H, the discussion about the rates, I was wondering, since Doug Mitarotonda is a board member elect and has special expertise in these kinds of matters, and I'm a candidate for the board, and I also have some expertise in these matters. I wondered if we could be included more generally in the discussion, not just a brief statement, but actually participate. Obviously, we're not entitled to vote, but I just wondered if that could happen.
Well, we'll just follow normal procedures, and I think you'll find that there will be no conclusions drawn today. The way I see this going, we'll just follow normal procedure.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to. I think there is value there is an election coming, so actually there is value for people to hear from Howard to see if they for the election. So as well as Doug. So I would support Howard request.
We will follow the normal process. Howard will have plenty of opportunity to talk about this during the public comments. We're always fairly informal about this. But like I said, I don't think any conclusions will be drawn today. And I think Howard and Doug will find that they will have a lot of opportunity to participate in the discussions, in the discussion. Anyone else?
Don't see any others, Eric.
Okay. Let's move on to item 7, written comments from the public. I know we have an interesting email from Jonelle Munt. I don't know if the one from Peter Young was included or not. But in any case, this has to do with a suggestion of a monetary sort of thank you to firefighters who helped fight the fire, the Caldor fire. We've done a little research. I'm not looking at the participant list. Is Jonelle on, Eric?
Not that I see, no.
Or Peter Young? Is Peter Young on?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, and anyway, we did a little research. Eric contacted our council, and because this is monies that were given to the 501c3, a decision about how to use that money and whether or not the idea is one that we should implement really needs to go through the KBFD board of directors. So we need to have a meeting of the KBFD board. And as a reminder, that's Eric Christensen, Peter, and myself, with Kelly and Jessica as other officers of the KBFD 501c3. So Eric, what I'd like to do is, as soon as practical, to call a meeting of the KBFD board of directors and to consider this idea.
Okay, we'll do. I'll work with you to schedule that.
And I don't know if this is not ordinarily a publicly noticed meeting, but I'd like it to be.
It's a private corporation, but we can do it with, I think we
Yeah,
should do as much transparency as possible.
Yeah, I certainly like people to be able to comment and give their thoughts on it. I mean, it's an interesting idea, definitely worth discussion and possible action. Okay.
I have a associated question. The stipend that the firefighter received is paid by KMPUD, not by the 501c3, if I'm correct.
That is correct.
And I just wonder if the personnel committee could look into increasing the stipend, actually.
Sure, we could.
Yeah.
What, generally, or just for?
I would say in general, I think I think the rates are fairly low and have not been changed for years. So there is inflation. I think we should revise that as
Didn't
well.
we, Eric, didn't we just modify that for the on-call work? Or was the on-call for utilities, right?
No, that was actually both. And we are actually commensurate with other local fire districts, Eastern Alpine, AFPD, Lockwood. We're actually pretty much right in the same wheelhouse with them. So we're paying market rate.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is something we could discuss, Bertrand, in personnel. Yes, we could too. Fair topic. But for this specific idea, we'll do it through the KBFD 501c3 Board of Directors. Sometime within this month, I would like it to be done. Okay. Let's go to adoption of the consent calendar. This will be item A, the July 10 regular meeting minutes. Item C, item D, the consent for claims. Item E, the receivable shut-offs report. And item F, approving Howard as a community member of the planning committee. A motion to adopt those items of the adoption count of the consent calendar.
Yeah, Dornberg so moved.
And,
Second,
Bertrand seconds. Okay, roll call, please.
Rickert,
Aye.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Perot,
aye.
Dornberg, aye.
Okay. Now we move to item B, approval of September 11th regular meeting minutes. And I will not vote on this one. Is there a motion to adopt those meeting minutes?
I move so.
Okay, Bertrand, is there a second?
Dornberg, I'll second that.
Roll call.
Rickert,
Abstain.
oh, that's right. Sorry. Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Dornberg, aye. 4-1, it passes.
Okay, and item C, approved September 30th special meeting minutes. Is there a motion to
Move
adopt?
so.
Bertrand moves. Is there a second?
Yeah, Dornberg, I'll second that.
Okay, roll call.
And Rickert,
Aye.
Epstein,
Abstain.
abstain.
He was not
Okay.
there.
I just want to, just for clarification.
Yeah.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Dornberg,
Okay.
aye. So
Great,
4-1.
thanks. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 10, items for board action. Finances, and Kelly, feel free to go through letters I through 4, I through IV.
I thought you wanted to move up those
Nope.
two.
We're moving them after D, Kel. You're up.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we'll start with, where is my board packet? We're going to start with the August finances on page. Sorry, I thought I was there.
We're in July.
July was just provided as informational purposes. I'm gonna start with August.
It's page 72, Kel.
Thank you. Yeah, I just got there. So on page 72, we'll start with the balance sheet for August. You'll see total operating funds are better than planned by $219,000. No other real notes on the balance sheet unless there are any questions.
So just as a clarification, so in this August, are you collecting the July electricity bill or the August electricity bill?
July.
July. So we are still on the old system for electricity.
Well, yes, because August billing doesn't happen until August 31st. So the cash collections through August are really for July's billing, correct?
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions about the balance sheet? Okay, we'll move on then to the revenue account by fund. You'll notice that water is at a negative, and that is mainly due to the principal and interest payment for our COP loans. We do an annual principal payment in August, and then we do an annual principal payment and interest payment in August, and then another only interest payment in February. So I expect to see some recovery in water moving forward, but it's just because of that large annual principal payment for the COP loans is why water has gone to the negative. And then obviously snow removal is at a negative due to the fact that we have yet to start collecting any contract revenues. Any questions about the revenue account by fund? Okay. Moving on to the combined income statement on page 75. Operating revenues for the month of August were down by $14,000. You can see that actually commercial revenue was actually better than planned. And the main reason for the operating revenues for August to be down is because of the previously discussed issues with the water and wastewater base rates. Year-to-date operating revenues are down from plan by $64,800. Although you can see total operating expenses for through the month of August are actually better than planned by $32,000. Moving on to water.
Can I ask something here? Actually, in the previous meetings, you were highlighting with a square the section, because it's difficult to follow visually. I mean, some people are more visually oriented than oral, like me.
Sure.
And it's really helpful actually when you have this little square like you did in the past.
Sure, I would normally have done that, Bertrand, but
yeah.
I was in the process of doing billing as well as getting the 2 months of financial statements out. So I didn't get a chance to do my normal annotations, but those will reconvene with the next meeting. I was just really swamped and wanted to get the packet out. So I apologize.
No problem, I understand, but I just want to emphasize the value of that little
Sure.
annotation. Thank you.
Absolutely, I agree with you. It helps me to to actually present the financials too. So I 100% agree with you. Okay, moving on to water on page 79 of your packet. Operating revenues for the month of August were down from plan by $3,300. Again, you can see that's 100% due to the base rate issue. You can see that actual commercial and residential water use was up through the month of August. And I mentioned in the finance committee meeting that because the August billing statements went out late due to being evacuated, this actually includes the first 8 days of September as well. So there were so it's all of August and the first 8 days of September. So that also has led to the increased usage over plan, as well as people using irrigation water. That was another big boost for our residential use. Total operating for water through August 31st is actually up from plan by $8,700. Moving on to wastewater on page 70 or on page 80 of your packet. Operating revenues for the month of August were down by $12,300. Year to date, they are down by $23,500. But total operating, you can see, is actually up from plan by $22,300. Moving on to electric on page 82 of your packet. Operating revenues for electric for the month of August were up from plan by $9,500. I want to also point out cost of goods sold. You can see that there's an overage of, as compared to budget, by $13,000 for the month of August. And year to date, July and August, there's an overage of $26,800. And this is mainly due to the fact that we budgeted our purchased power costs at 6.5 cents a kilowatt hour. But the actuals on the day ahead market were more expensive than what we had budgeted. Bob also had mentioned in the finance committee meeting that this is also, you have to take into account the time of year that we are purchasing this power, and summer power tends to be more expensive than winter power. So we would expect this to come back into line as we move through the winter. Total operating for electric is down from plan by about $30,000. Moving on to propane on page 85 of your.
Kelly, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Sure,
On the
no.
electric, we have the option to move away from the day ahead market, right? We can do that with Shell at any time, or is it
I don't-
contractual?
You know, Brandy might have a better answer for that. I don't know about, you know, what the rules are, but we definitely have not hedged anything because we had found in the past that we were losing money when we had hedged. But Brandy, I don't know if you want to say anything about what the rules are about switching back and forth.
Sure. We could entertain a proposal from Shell to hedge. They would be able to do that for us. It would just be a decision by the board on whether we thought the terms of that agreement were better or worse than what we're getting on the day ahead market.
So I mean, so as the year progresses and whoever is on the new board can look at this at some point.
Yes.
If for some reason the day ahead continues to be more expensive unexpectedly.
Yeah, Eric, it's a high risk because if you contract, then you're obligated to find a buyer for it if you don't use it. So you have to precisely predict your electric demand.
Yeah, that's what we did the first several years, right? I mean, that's what we did.
We
did.
tried it. We lost
Yeah.
money.
And we do have the WAPA power that should be coming online in 2024. It's not anything that'll help us this year, but that's still on the horizon.
Okay, my thought is just not to take it for granted. Just keep an eye on it. That's really my thought.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Okay. Moving on to propane on page 85 of your packet. Operating revenues for propane were down by $8,700 for the month of August. Year to date, they're down by $20,000. But you can see that total operating is actually better than planned by $15,400. That's all I have on the income statements, unless there are any questions about any other of the funds. Okay, we'll move on then to the income statement comparison on page 88 of your packet. And I just wanted to point out, you can see this in August, this is where the new rates for electric came into effect. So you can see the big difference between the commercial and residential usage and the base rates as compared to last August. Any questions about the income statement comparison? Okay, we'll move on then to September preliminaries. Operating revenues for September were down from plan by $67,000. And year-to-date operating revenues are down by $132,000.
So the
And-
$67,000 negative, so if August included 8 days of September, then this excludes
Right.
8 days of September.
This is missing 8 days of September
Yes,
in as
okay.
far as usage reads go, correct? So that's why you'd really just want to look at the year-to-date,
Right.
you know, where we are right now, and that's at $132,000.
Yeah. So really what stands out to me here is the management of costs to keep us overall positive, but the revenue is certainly a little worrisome.
Well,
I mean-
Eric, we went from 100 people in residence to 16.
Well, I know it.
So, I mean, you know,
I know the question is how quickly will people come back?
And you don't see the balance of the cost of goods sold yet that weren't
Right.
sold on the bottom. So this is, it's a little
Yeah.
misleading at this point. It's a preliminary.
Right,
Ah.
right.
As in the past, we already discussed the idea of also publishing the total day of water use as an indicator of occupancy. And I think that'd be useful to have that information every month. So you could relate the loss and maybe show the trend on occupation using the day of use. We have the data.
I thought we added that to performance reporting. Did we not?
Oh, is it? I didn't see it today.
Maybe we didn't. I thought we had. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I didn't see it. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So it allows us to rationalize variations. So if we can see, for example, that the revenue is going down, but the occupancy is going up, then there is a problem. But if they are following in line, it actually makes sense. And since Bob did all this work to make this available at the fingertip, I think we should use it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting information for sure. Okay.
Okay. Moving on to cash flow on page 90. We ended September at 1.77 million in total operating cash. You'll notice the LAIF balance did go down, and that was due to the fact that we paid off our second loan, our A817 loan. And even with doing that, we are still at $300,000 above plan for operating cash.
So Kelly, that loan was not all the 907,000 shown here. It was another 800,000 or something like that.
No, it's part of the 900,000. It's like 580,000 of the 900,000 was the payoff of the loan.
Okay.
So you can see, like in the following months there, the Russ principal
Right.
portion is right around $500,000
Got
or 400.
Got it.
Yeah,
So that's the second one we've been able to pay off.
correct.
That's great.
And this is the most substantial one. The first one that we paid off was an $89,000 payment. So this is the first really large payoff that we've done.
Okay.
But again, considering the fact that we did that and we're still above plan for total operating cash, I think that even with revenues being down, like you said, it's a testament to the management of costs.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moving down to budget variance tracking. So you can see the two new things that I added were the electric cost of purchase power through August 21st. And this is the overage as compared to budget of $25,000. And then the electric cost of diesel through August 21 is above plan by $1,100.
Kelly, can you just correct that? It's August 2021.
Yes, August
Not the 21st of
2021,
August.
not the 21st of August, correct.
So I have a question actually on the cost of diesel. So clearly we have a tank, and so when we did run the diesel during the mandatory evacuation, we are using the fuel in the tank. And most likely that fuel was filled at a time where it was much cheaper than it is now. If we have to refill it, how do we tabulate the fact that it may actually cost a lot of more money? Is that 1125 related to that, or it's a different concept?
So the $1,125 is the comparison to what we had budgeted for the cost of diesel.
Okay.
The cost of diesel, or the cost of goods sales, is calculated on what the actual cost of the diesel was when we filled the tank.
Yeah.
So we're not costing it out at the higher rate. We're costing it out at what we actually paid for it.
Yeah. But the fact is, we have going to have to refill that tank. It's probably going to cost more money now.
Right, but at that point, when we refill it, it goes to, it's an inventory item, and it's not actually cost out until we actually use the diesel.
Use it. Okay.
Okay. That is all I have on financials.
As always, Kelly, great job.
Thank you.
It's a big volume of stuff. Thank you very much. Okay, we now have item B, which is performance reporting and aquifer levels. And I believe that was in one of the supplements.
It was in the first supplement.
Number one. Hi, Brandy. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
So we have July, August, and September all presented here as a year-to-date. And if we start with electric generation, we can see that year-to-date we are at 20% unidentified losses. And so July was pretty par for the course. We were on Out Valley Power the whole time. We see normal seasonal high losses in the summer. In August, we had just a day or so of generator runs. And then in September, we had the rest of that week that we were on generators. So you can see kind of an up and down there for the losses. I will note, like Kelly said, that August billing was late. So when we did our meter reads, that was into September. So we show a little more loss in September. For propane, one more note on electric before we move on. You can see that our sales versus our budget is down year to date. And that's just very few people were here, and very few people are here now. So moving on to propane.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Of course.
So do you think there is a correlation with the fact that we use much more the power plant in September than the other months to correlate with the higher unidentified system loss, which is actually very high in September. 35% is not a number I'm comfortable with. And do you have any insight on what's going on here?
Yes, when we run the powerhouse, we do see higher losses than when we're on Out Valley. So that definitely contributes. We also had a power outage, and when we have power outages and the transformers get cold, re-energizing those leads to extra losses in our system. So we had there was a problem on the direct vary line to the N, so we had to re-energize that section of the line several times. So I think all of that contributed to September's losses, but also the fact that August, the losses in August were only 8%, indicates that some of the losses that we are attributing to September should have actually been attributed to August because of the billing date. Okay, any other questions before we go to propane? Okay. So for propane, July, August, fairly normal, but you can see the same thing happen between August and September billing in propane. So we had a 6% loss in August, a negative 32% loss in September. Year to date, we're at -4, which is really fairly normal for the propane system. And we again see that we have about 500,000 cubic feet less actual sold than we expected to sell.
I thought spontaneous generation was not existing.
No, I don't think the fire got
Yeah.
close enough to warm up the tanks that much.
Yeah, it's obviously not a worrisome issue. Yeah.
We see it continually. Okay, and then if we go on to water, you'll see for water, we actually are running about at budget for our water metered versus our budget. But if you look into August and September for fire department, we had significant water use for not necessarily our fire department, but all of the regional fighters that were using water from our system to help fight the Caldor fire. So our losses are relatively low. We're at 11% year to date, but you do see the impacts of the fire usage. And we did get a call from the resort saying, "Oh, I heard you guys ran out of water," which we told them that, no, we didn't. Our aquifer levels, we'll see in just a second, but our aquifer levels remained fine throughout the whole thing. We were able to provide water to the firefighting efforts. And one other note on water, we did have people not only using irrigation water for personal firefighting efforts at their own homes, running sprinklers and whatnot. But we also had people who didn't have irrigation meters who ran domestic water sprinkled onto their lawn. And you can see that under wastewater in our large negative loss for the month of August. So last note on wastewater, you'll see, like I noted, we have a negative loss in August. Year to date, we're at 5%, which is, we're in a dry time of year, not yet getting into the wet season. So a pretty normal and good result for the first 3 months of the fiscal year.
So you lost me when you said that people using their home water for irrigation increase the unidentified unmetered usage. I just don't see the correlation.
So we only have the one water meter. And so when people use
oh, I got it. Because you have a meter at the plant station, so the water is not coming back to you. Okay.
Correct.
I totally got it. Thank you.
And it's negative instead of positive.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's what's probably throwing everyone.
I get it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, people, impressive.
And then the last thing on this subject, the aquifer sheets are in here just so that you can see the aquifer levels, July, August, and September. And really you can see that throughout the event, we had good aquifer levels. We didn't see any danger of running out of water, just so that that the board can take a look at that.
That's hugely encouraging, Randy. Thank you.
And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any comments from?
Do you have a sense of how many cubic feet we actually contributed to the Caldor fire?
Our best, just for filling tanker trucks or something along those lines, based on the August, September numbers, 100,000 gallons, something like that.
Well, not that much. Huh? Yeah. Well, they were using the Keppel's Lake water with their bucket. So
All right, that's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Brandy.
Thank you.
So now we'll go on to item C, which is ordinance number 21-01, propane electric meter protection. Brandy, is this you too?
It is, thank you.
Okay.
So this is a combination item here. We wanted to give the board an update on how the electric propane meter protection project was going. And also request that the board approve an extension on the deadline for completion of the project because of all of the things that we've had happen here this summer. So to start with kind of the background, you can see here in the staff report, which was also in that first supplement, the breakdown of which electric and which propane meters were rated at which tiers. For electric, most of the electric meters are just fine. 84% were built to standard. And there was only one electric meter that was rated as high risk, and it had shown impacts of snow before. It was hanging off the wall. We have most of our electric meters are in reasonably good shape. For propane, we have kind of the opposite situation, with only 8% of propane being built to standard and 134 or 56% being medium risk. And I've talked to lots of customers, and there's lots of discussion. I think by and large, most people understand what we're trying to do, which is get everybody to a safe, level playing field on what we expect from meter protection. But there's also a lot of, well, my propane meter is different because it's under a deck or under the shed or what have you. So we've been working with customers to try to help them come up with a plan that meets our standard and, just understand what we're trying to do here. There's a lot of people who are working on it. I've talked to 90 different customers that are trying to do something, working on it. 41 customers have completed all of their required improvements. But there's a lot of customers who are on board or trying, but with delays because of contractors, we were evacuated for a while. They just aren't able to get it done. And so we're recommending that that the board approve a 12-month extension for the actual building of the structures, but leave in place the 5-month agreement, the unsafe meter agreement deadlines that were written in the original ordinance. And I would be happy to answer any questions on this.
Okay, first of all, are there any comments from the public on this?
Well, Brandy, just one clarification. We actually have many more meters than this. So this excludes meters that are in meter rooms, I assume, or indoors.
It does. Any meters that are indoors in banks or anything like that, these are just the exterior meters.
Okay, because otherwise it looks like we're not in very good shape as a total aggregate, but in fact we are.
That's true. I did not add in the ones that are in meter rooms, but you're absolutely correct.
Okay.
And in the same, and actually, can you quantify how many are cabin or duplex versus condos? Are they mostly cabins and duplexes? Or you also have condos?
The condos are also in here.
Okay.
Condos are also in here for propane because those are all exterior. For electric, however, these are mostly cabins and duplexes. Most of the large condos like Mountain Club or the Meadows, those are indoors. So for electric, this skews towards single family homes.
Are there any comments from the public? Are there any hands raised?
don't see any, Eric.
Okay.
So I have a question. If someone hasn't complied with the recommendation, they automatically fall in a hold harmless capacity with regards to the district. Is that correct? If this ordinance, if what you're saying is that, am I interpreting that right?
I don't, go ahead.
It depends on the risk level. If they are low risk, tier 2, they have 18 months from the time we sent the notice out to correct the meter shed issue. If they plan on not correcting it, it's within 5 months to sign a meter agreement. So they could be continuing to plan to do that, and they wouldn't have to sign the agreement. But all of the agreement deadlines were within 5 months. So we're pushing up on that here pretty soon.
Are you going to send out notifications?
I would think that after the board's decision here, that we would need to go back to all of the customers who we have not either gotten compliance or gotten the unsafe meter agreement from, and let them know the extended deadline and that the meter agreement is still required.
Well, I think it's important that we communicate that.
Agreed.
I mean, it's one thing to say you've got another year to do the job, but I think there would be some confusion as to, especially with regards to homeowners insurance and stuff. You understand what I'm trying to convey?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And Brandy's been in communication with all these customers with great regularity. So there has been very good, clear communication from Brandy. So I'm sure she'll continue that.
Well, I've noted in my tours that I did of the affected area in the KMA from the fire prevention that an awful lot of people are trying to comply with propane meter protection. I was surprised at how many customers have actually started remediation, and maybe they just haven't notified the district. I was encouraged when I saw that.
Myself, I have to comment. First, like Bob, I was a bit dismayed about the poor situation for propane. That now that I understand it's only the exterior, and we have many more meters in the valley, I feel better. That number one. Number two, I'm going to put the hat of planning propane shifting lead, and so I do support the requested actions by the staff. And not only it achieve what the staff is trying to achieve, it also give a bit more time for people to assess now that we have changed electrical rate. Should they move to electric from propane and rather spend money in that conversion instead of building a propane meter enclosure, which can be quite expensive in some situations. So I'm totally in favor, and maybe I would add that for the people that actually want to shift away from propane, maybe we should consider extending a further extension in the future. I don't think we need it to be done now, but that's definitively the kind of thing that planning committee is going to look at, and we'll come back to the board on. But I do support the concept of what the staff is trying to do here, but I also want to add that propane shifting angle, and maybe we should consider actually use that as an encouragement for people to spend their money on upgrading their their heating to electrical.
Yeah, that's a good point, Bertrand. If someone wanted to, right now, the district does not have a disconnection policy. So we would need to do that. But if someone wanted to disconnect from propane, provided the board adopted a disconnection policy, then we could eliminate their need to comply. So I think that's a good point.
Okay, any other comments before we consider a motion? If not, then would someone like to make a motion to approve the requested action that the board approve a 12-month extension for the installation of propane electric meter protection as required by ordinance 21-01.
Yeah, motion to approve.
Okay, that's John.
I second.
That's Bertrand. Peter, roll call.
Sure. Rickard,
Aye.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Dornbrook, aye. It's unanimous.
Great, thank you. We move on to item D, which is the Ogals Park Improvement Project. Notice of district's intent to file notice of exemption and other associated environmental documents necessary in association with this project. Eric.
Yes, so this is just it's a categorical exemption for the minor improvements we're doing. It's all we're ostensibly doing is pouring concrete pads for picnic tables, as well as the picnic tables themselves, and a pad for the bear-proof trash can. So it comes under categorical exemption.
Okay, so we are asking us to make a motion to accept the notice of exemption.
Correct.
Any discussion on this item?
We're not actually going to try to pour this fall, are we?
No, we have to go through the process with OGALS, but two things are required for OGALS, and if Tommy's still on, he can chime in, but we have to do an environmental document and we have to do a deed restriction. We've already done everything else, which is the plans, the cost estimate, et cetera, but we have to do an environmental document and a deed restriction. So the deed restriction is with OGALS. They have to give us a specific one, but we need to get this notice of exemption to them before December 31st. And it's a 30-day filing period.
So for the environmental impact, do we need to, is that done internally or do we need to hire someone?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Bertrand. I'm sorry.
So are you saying that we need to do an environmental impact study, or it's just a form?
No, this is all we need to do. It's a categorical exemption, so that's all we need to. We have to file this with the state OPR, the clearinghouse, post it, and then we record it with Alpine County Recorder's Office.
Yeah, so I was under the impression that we are not authorized to skip the environmental study. But
this is the totality of the environmental study required. It's not an EIR, it's not a mitigated negative declaration, it's not a negative declaration, it's a categorical exemption. There's about 4 categories in there, and this is in the lowest tier. It's the least impact.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve of this notice of exemption?
Yes, Dornbrook, I move to approve the notice of exemption.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
That's John. Okay. Roll call.
Rickard,
Aye.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Dornbrook, aye. It's unanimous.
Great. Thank you. Okay. We're going to, this is where we're moving G and H up. So on item G, KMPUD report server, just as an introduction, there's been substantial amount of discussion over past months about access to the data on the report server, what the report server does, who generates reports, the roles of the staff, the roles of the board members, and so on. So this is an opportunity for us to try to clarify all that. And so with that, I will turn it over to Eric.
Sure. So this just a recap. Basically, the report server was built well before my time, but its functionality was to basically improve efficiency of staff throughout all of our areas of work, whether it's assembling our billing through PCS, tracking our snow removal through Fleet Track, or compiling our meter data so customers can read it on the website and get their hourly usage. Basically, this tool just aggregates all those in one area and it also allows staff to send out the community notices that were instrumental during the fire, et cetera. So right now, The program is provided by Director Epstein, free of charge. And we also have a contract with Corey Jackson, and he does programming, and we have a monthly bill from him for his efforts as well. But Director Epstein working on this and doing the programming definitely helps keep the costs low. So all the data entry, all the report generation and analysis, staff does. We tell Bob and Corey, we'd like a report that could do this. Can you build it for us? And they do the programming behind the scene, or the board requests something. The totality of the board requests something, and then through the board, obviously Bob knows, but it comes back down through staff, and we ask Corey or Bob to do the programming to implement those changes that the board's requested. So in terms of access, I mean, obviously Bob is doing the programming, so he's behind the wall, but it's same as any other consultant, Fleet Track or Census or PCS, they also are behind the curtain and can see everything. But again, all Bob's doing is doing the programming. Staff is providing the direction of what we want, what reports we want, or the board through staff. And we're the ones pulling those reports. So that's the short version.
So I think, well, Bertrand, why don't you discuss what it is that you have requested or want or desire?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to first thank Bob for providing this fantastic tool that actually bring the PUD in the 21st century as far as data analysis ability. And I think it's underutilized. I think, for example, for the electrical reg study, we could have done more analysis that were, and the blocking stage was that Bob was the one doing all the investigation he wanted. And I think for this kind of, and we have the problem, for example, now for propane coming up, for planning how we can deal with propane shifting, and what kind of incentive could we give to people to go to all electric. And it'd be very useful, not indeed to access the data from individual customer, but to be able to access the distribution of the data across the valley. And so we could do simulation. I think board members should be allowed to actually access that. Typically, database have multiple level of privilege, and obviously you don't want everyone to start editing that database, so that need to be locked. But there should be some viewing abilities offered to board members so they can do the simulation and propose what works best for our community based on the data.
Ordinarily, am I correct in saying that ordinarily doing that kind of simulation so on would be staff work?
Yes. In any other public agency I've worked at, that is correct.
Yeah, so this just gets into what's the role of board members, what's the role of staff members, and I realize that has become a little bit blurred with Bob's efforts, because he was the person who created the report server software. And donated it to the district, and has been an invaluable resource in that respect. So I understand that things have been blurred, but I need to turn to I personally need to turn to people who understand all this better than I. I'm concerned about privacy. I'm concerned about security. I'm concerned about clarity of roles between board members and staff members. And I would prefer that those roles be clear and well marked, well demarked. So anyway, do other board members have thoughts on this?
Well, let me offer a couple of comments, because I certainly want to do whatever we can to support good decision analysis. And in this particular, if we look at the wastewater and water study, we actually used the report server to generate the data and then turned it over to the consultant who did the analysis. And that general format was to take the raw data, do the corrections that were found that were done by staff, and then turn over the raw data in a spreadsheet. And so in the case of the rates, the electric rate study, I was very reluctant to spend $40,000 during times of uncertainty and COVID to do it. So I probably did more than would normally be done. But we also, Eric very much wanted it in a format where this is the conceptual information we need. Give me one button that converts it to a spreadsheet and then do the analysis. When Bertrand and I worked on looking at the driveways and things, that was also the format we used. So I'd be very willing to, when Eric sees that there's a conceptual need, or Bertrand working through Eric, to be able to take the conceptual data, sanitize it, and be able to generate spreadsheets and work in that direction. That's probably a lot less work for me than making the changes that would be needed to do more direct access. But I just want to make us successful, so I'm open to whatever works.
Other board members, John, I know you've got experience in
Yeah,
this general area.
I spent a few years doing this sort of thing. Yeah, I'd like to see what we have with regards to a data protection policy. If we have something in place, if we don't, I'd like to see us generate a data protection policy with regards to who can access, who can update, who can change underlying schema information. And it even goes beyond that. Does the data have to be accessed on servers that are on premise at the PUD or in a public cloud that's controlled by the cloud vendor at the direction of PUD? Can the data be downloaded to be used on your own personal computer, server, MacBook? Can it be uploaded to another service? So if I was asked to do this work, I'd probably be saying, yeah, I'd like to take the data and load it into something like Snowflake. Or if I want to do more unstructured data analysis, I'd probably put it in, Spark or something like that on Amazon Web Services or Microsoft or so forth. So I think there's a lot of issues there. And then there's probably some regulations with regard to what we're allowed to do with data, especially since there's customer data in there. And I know, we all understand the regulations around HIPAA for healthcare records, and GDPR is something that's a worldwide effort over the last 10 years to protect data with some pretty severe penalties if you violate GDPR regulations. So rather than just dealing with this at a report server level, I'd like to see, I'd like to see staff generate a data protection policy, taking all that into consideration, and then decide which committee should review that, and then make a recommendation to the board and say, here's our policy with regards to data. Because I think it's very dangerous to be able to take this off site, and I think it's and I think all of this really should be at the direction of PUD management as well. Like, I think as a board member, I think if I want some analysis done or I want some data, I think I should have the board ask the PUD to do that work, and not have myself as an individual just going in and doing that sort of data access and analytics. So to summarize, I'd like to see a data protection policy generated by staff and then go through a committee and be approved by the board.
And John, would that data access policy then address roles and responsibilities then? Is that what you're
I think there's a related policy that would be what's our policy for who can maintain, enhance, and operate our systems. And just criteria for that's going to be the person has to have the expertise, what's the cost of the resource, but they also should have some agreements in place. For example, an invention assignment agreement. So any sort of enhancements they do on behalf of the PUD are the PUD's property as the default. Probably some non-disclosure agreements. And then it's related to the data policy, because certainly you can do enhancements to software against test data. So it doesn't actually require that you go against the live data, but there may be times where you want to run a test against live data. And so then there'd have to be some sort of, then it relates to the data policy as well. So I think there's really two. One is who can operate and run these systems, and that should be done at the direction of PUD management, and then the data protection policy. So really two different policies would be really helpful to clarify this.
Eric, what do you think of that? Staff members, Jim?
I think that's a good idea. I can tell you there's a lot of, I had to do I don't know, Kelly remembers, I had to do about a 18-page questionnaire on cybersecurity for our insurance company as to who had to access the data, and that was a big component of theirs. Our auditors are also concerned about that as well. So I know that's a component, but yeah, staff we'd be happy to try and get some representative policies and draft something up that's customized to us.
Okay, well, my guess is that drafting such policies and having it go through a committee will happen before, will happen after I'm off the board. But I would just like to say that, just from because I'm a layperson in this arena, what I want is clear roles and responsibilities more than anything else. It's painful, to be honest, it's painful to see really the arguments occur about that person has access, but I don't. And, it really should come down to clear roles and responsibilities between board members who are responsible for developing policies and staff who are responsible for implementing those policies. I would just like to, that would be my position, but if that could be embedded in the second policy, that would be great. And clearly the communications IT committee is the place where this should go whenever it's drafted. So that's my suggestion. I think John's suggestion is a good one. I think it's an important topic. I do think that board members can contribute a lot to requesting reports, understanding the data, understanding how data can be looked at in different ways for informed decision making. So I think the board members do have a role in that sense, but I just think there needs to be clear roles and responsibilities, and we need to comply with good data, privacy, security, best practices. So that's my thoughts. Peter, do you have any thoughts?
I pretty much concur with what you just said, and also what John mentioned. I think it's really important that the staff knows what's going on, and more than I wouldn't understand it to begin with.
Yeah, you and me, Peter, you and I are together on that one.
I could weld the box to put the data in, keep it safe.
Are there any comments from the public members?
Yes, Howard had his hand up first, and then Doug.
Okay, thank you, Howard.
Yes, thank you. And I do also agree with everything that John and Eric Rickert just said. So I think that's very good. I do have a couple questions though. First of all, it says here that Mr. Jackson is capable of complete management. So we have two people then who are capable of this, Mr. Jackson and Bob. So what if, both of them were not available at some time in the future? Is all of this documented in a way that some other consultant could be hired? Would it just be obvious? And I guess this is probably mostly directed to Bob. Would it be possible to get somebody else come in here if we needed? And then also my other question would be about requesting reports. It would be interesting to know. I mean, first of all, how is that if a director wants to request a report now, is that something that can be done between meetings, or does this have to come before the whole board as a request, or how is that handled?
So if it's a document that exists, if it's a if I can push a button and generate a report, that would be no different than any member of the public or the board requesting it. It can be generated as part of a CPRA request. If there's something new that's wanted, that direction needs to come from the board, not just one board member, because that does have cost implications and staff time implications as well. So if it's a readily available document, I mean, Bertrand used to do a lot of CPRAs before he was on the board, and he got a lot of documents. It's the same process. We had that ability to generate those.
And Bob, are you able to answer the question that Howard asked?
Well, I can, but generally what we tried to do is make sure that, I mean, we both get hit by a bus, that there's no dependence. You would back off and not use the report server. So it's set up, PCS actually generates all the invoices, and then the report server makes them easier to read. But the PCS invoices could be sent out. So the daily operations are not dependent on it, they're just enhanced by it. So rather than claiming that somebody who's never seen it before could come in and do something, I think it's more likely that its usage would be curtailed. NRDC uses the same software. They've used it for 3 years without ever calling me. So I think that's a testimony that's it's fairly well debugged, but I think you would just discontinue it as opposed to trying to find someone who could pick it up. And that's why there's 2 of us.
Okay. And then Doug Mitaratonda, is that who had his hand up?
That's correct.
Doug?
Hey there. Hi, everyone. I would start by just saying I agree with John's assessment. I think having the compliance and policies are really important. I think there's a lot of risk involved. GDPR, CCPA, all these types of laws are really important that we have clear guidelines on who can access and what kind of access they have, read only, write access, where it can be stored and downloaded is very important. So if that isn't clear right now, I think we do want to make sure that is clarified. In terms of my thoughts on the who accesses what, in my experience, is typically a board would not access the data directly, and it would be the board making requests of staff and having reports. And I just think of this more of a process as to why would a board member want access to this data at this point. And I think if you look at the rate study that we just did, there were just a lot of moving parts. There were a lot of scenarios. Every meeting, there were a number of different conversations and there are so many different levers that could be moved. And I think that's just one of the areas where if there's a clear process of what needs to be made available going into a rate study, if, for example, or what is the common information that everyone's be working from, and having that reported out commonly, and then just making sure that it's very clear what's being delineated. I think that can help with the request need would possibly go away if we, as a board, if it is agreed that these are the scenarios, these are the levers we want to move on, and moving in an ordinal process that everyone can move on together as a evaluation of the same information. I think that would probably be easier for staff because you're not fielding requests from every board member for their individual scenarios, but also easier for the board because everyone's going to be working a little more in parallel in the different scenarios and having to come to agreement on the different scenarios that want to be evaluated. So I just think that this is more of potentially a process question as to why would someone want access to this as a board member potentially than it is a board member should have access to the data.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting and key question. Yeah, thanks, Doug. Well, is there a direction that the board would like to give staff? Bertrand?
I'd like to make a comment before
Sure.
we move forward. I do agree with most of what's been said here. And yes, we need a process. I'll be fine actually working with through the staff. I don't have a problem at all with that. The reason I was actually asking for direct access is because during the electrical rate study, like Doug just said, we could have actually been able to do more simulation, and it didn't happen. And I think because of that, now we are trying to, we need to adjust that ordinance. And I think I could see two committees that really need to be able to access the data. Could be through the staff generating the report. I don't have a problem with that. It is planning and financing. Planning really need it. For example, as of now, we are working on trying to do propane shifting. And so that's how being able to do simulation and try to see, for example, should we offer a discount for people that are all electric? And I'll be talking about that later in the agenda. And what should be that discount? And I think to be able to do that, we need to have access to the data. And so I'm totally aware of the subtleties and the legal obligation that the district has. So I don't have a problem with any of that. I'm great of the discussion happening now. Great idea to actually define what can be done and how it can be done, and how we make sure that all this data is secure and safe and there is no privacy issues. And so, as I said, I'm pleased about how this is going here.
Thanks, Bertrand.
So I think if, I mean, some of what we're discussing is a requirement for a couple of policies, but I also think, going into a project, if you're looking at electrification and conversion from propane, let's just get it written up as far as, what sort of analysis do we, think we're going to need to accomplish that project, and get that out in front of Eric and staff early, and make sure they're prepared to provide that. And I know that during the course of the project, you'll probably think of other things you need. And, at least you'll have a baseline to start from.
Okay, so what I'm understanding then is there's general agreement that we ask staff to draft two related policies. And John, would you care to summarize those two policies again?
Yeah, I think there's one around policy for who can maintain, enhance, and operate our systems, and what the criteria is and what sort of agreements have to be in place with the individuals doing that. And I can send something offline with a little bit more detail than that to Eric to start from. And then I think the other one is a data protection policy. Who can access, who can update, who can change underlying structure and schema information. Download, can it be off premise from the PUD or off premise from a cloud that's managed on behalf of the PUD, things like that. So data protection policy and probably a systems infrastructure policy.
So would you like to make a motion that we direct staff to undertake drafting those policies?
Yes.
For review by the Communications and IT Committee?
Yes. Motion to have staff generate those policies, have them reviewed by Communications, and then Communications can make a recommendation to the board.
I second.
That's a second. The motion by Bertrand. A roll call, Peter?
Rickert,
Aye.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Dornbrook, aye. It's unanimous.
Great. Thanks all. That's excellent. Okay. We'll now move on to what was item H, which is the ordinance number 21-02, revising electric rates and rate structure. We actually have two sets of thoughts. One set of thoughts came from Bob Epstein, which were more on the more general side, and some very specific ones from Bertrand. I'd like to kind of go from the general to the specific, and delay any actions. What is really for discussion. I don't think we're going to make decisions here. I think I see more committee work in the future. But Bob, why don't you start with your thoughts, and then we can move on to Bertrand's more specific thoughts.
Happy to do that.
See what we want to do.
Yeah, in our communications to customers on July, after we adopted the final policy, we identified places where we wanted to do additional work. And Eric, you had suggested that I try to write those up, not the solutions, but the general areas, and see if there's agreement at this meeting that those are the areas that we really want to work on. Going back to the previous conversation, do some data analysis to see how many customers are affected by various scenarios. I noticed there's a new house under construction on East Meadows Drive. Should that house do electric or propane? And maybe they've already decided, I don't know, but I was just delighted to see new construction in the valley. I also discussed this with Severin Borenstein last week and asked whether there might be faculty or graduate students at the Haas School of Business that might find this an interesting project. Severin told me that when he gives talks now, he brings us up as an example. So I was very proud of that fact, because and in fact, at this week, I was at the state-sponsored Asilomar Conference on the Future of Transportation, and rate design came up. So we're on the cutting edge. I'm proud of that fact. It's something a small utility can do. And I have some other examples of that, which will come up later. So what I did is I first tried to produce as concise as possible, just a summary of the objectives that we did as a board, and just a summary of the changes. And then that comes down to, if we can just slide this down a little bit, Eric, the known issues that we discussed as a board, for which there's additional work we'd like to do. So, so the first one is, I did a lot of work in the past on sales plans, and all the salespeople do is read their compensation plan, and that would determine their behavior. Rational customers would do the same thing. If you already have a fixed AMU that represents your average usage, because you haven't really changed, you're off to the races. All you want to know is the board isn't going to pull this out from underneath you or make a change. And I've talked with several customers who have plans to productively increase their electric use, knowing that that increased usage will be at 22 cents. But if you don't have 3 years, I see several people in the audience who fall into that category. Our message is, boy, if you can just stop using electricity and wait it out, you'll get a lifetime of savings. And it isn't our intention to tell them, please wait, but we want to think through, well, if somebody does want to increase that usage now, does want to switch from propane to electric, but doesn't have a fixed one, but doesn't want to see that in their base rate, that's an opportunity where all we're doing is delaying the market by telling them to wait. Again, I'm not proposing we use this meeting to discuss solutions. I'm just looking whether this is a category that we would like to further address and solve. The second one I want to bring up is, in doing the analysis, we went through, let me say that staff requested, we supplied and looked at a comparison of every customer, what's by property type, what's their average usage when they're in residence and when they're not in residence. And I just want to remind people, we simulate that by saying, if their water meter registered some usage in a 24-hour period, we represent that as they were in residence. If not, we assume they're not. It's a crude proxy for that, but we have nothing better. And we could in the future test that with people, but for the moment, we're assuming that's reasonably accurate. The biggest variability is the number of days of residency. So if a customer is currently here 300 days a year, and due to a lifestyle change, they're going to be here 100 days a year, 50 days a year, that's a significant change. So that's another category that we thought we should, that we have in the past discussed considering. The third category really got affected when the board decided at the June meeting to ignore the COVID year. So that meant that when we transitioned from a new owner, from a previous owner, as you can see in there, it's a long wait for some of these people. And if they're about the same usage, it doesn't matter. If there's significant different usage, and we had a customer talk about that at our last full board meeting, it's a long time to wait. So do we want to look at that as an issue? I think the data would lead to some ideas. And then the fourth one is in the future, new construction that wants to do electric heat. If you want to arbitrage the system, you would put in propane and then 3 years switch out to electric. But if you start with all electric, you're starting out very expensive. So those are the four categories that I remember from the board meetings that we said we wanted to do enhancements to the policy. So my purpose in putting this together is just to suggest that if these are relatively correct, not to try to solve them today, but to say these are things that we'd want to work on. We want to have data, and Eric actually has some data if people are interested in some of these categories. But that was the purpose of this memo.
Okay, Bob, thanks very much. Before we go on to Bertrand's thoughts, is there any comment from the board or from the public on these four items? Are there other kinds of categories that might be looked at? Any comments on these?
The one thing I think we could take a look at is when you look at conversion from propane, or if you look at a new construction that would be electric only, we do have two pieces of data on all these properties. So if we see a drop in propane and an increase in electricity, that would signal to us that there's a conversion or a retrofit going on. And if you had new construction and they had no propane use and electric use, we can use that as an indication to do something to address the situation with real empirical evidence that they did something, right? We're going to see a lack of use of propane that could be used somehow algorithmically to offset the cost of their electricity and their base rate. Just something to think about.
Let me go to the public. Anybody public have their hands raised?
Howard and then Doug.
Okay, Howard, here's your chance.
All right, thank you, Eric. I guess first of all, I always like to go back to basics, and Bob brought up the 7 objectives, I guess, of the rate study. I think initially it was 5, and it got expanded to 6, and now 7. But the one I particularly want to focus on is that the rate design should reduce changes to the existing rates. That makes perfect sense politically and trying to get something through and not get people stirred up. But it also presumes that the rates we've had all along have been fair. And to me, the hard work that Eric Christensen and Bob did in putting all this rate study together, and I know you both worked very hard on this, the value to me was in then realizing how unfair our rates have been to our permanent residents all along. The fact that 90% of the costs are fixed, and we were collecting the money from people based on just their usage. It had nothing to do with capacity. And so I think there have been 2 really major shifts in the burden of paying for our very expensive electric system. One has been from Vail Resorts over to the PUD itself. In other words, the way I would look at things, and I think this can be pretty clearly demonstrated, and it's not hard to figure out, but Vail Resorts is underpaying probably on the order of a couple hundred, 300,000. We could run some scenarios, different scenarios in the report server to get the actual number. But I would suggest that because their load is very peaky, that is, it's only for a few months out of the year, and these facilities are available to Vail Resorts 12 months out of the year. The PUD itself in running water, wastewater, community services building is incurring electric costs all year round. And any electric rate schedule that I've ever seen, and I've looked at many across the country, from Florida to California to Hawaii, will always include demand charges. And that means kilowatts of demand rather than kilowatt hours of energy usage. So the fact that there's no demand charge means that certainly within the commercial category, the PUD itself is overpaying and Vail Resorts is underpaying. And a similar situation exists on the resident. So that's just one transfer that I see going on. When we go into the residential side, really, those of us, like most of us, who have second homes at Kirkwood, have two homes to share their electric use between, we are underpaying. And those of you who live at Kirkwood full-time, you're overpaying. And I think that the rates, these issues, these four issues that Bob brought up can be rectified in some very good ways and productive ways, and they need to be explored further. And it would take care of most of this inequity or these issues that Bob has brought up. But I would like to request that and again, I'm not sure how you want to make this happen, but that a scenario be run just taking a look at all residential customers. And if there was $100 per month, $100 monthly minimum charge for electric bill, how much could we reduce the base rate from the amount that it was increased to? I wouldn't propose changing the energy rate, which is per kilowatt hour, but most of the inequity and concern falls into this base rate. And so I would request that an evaluation be made as soon as possible to determine, just answer that one question. If there was $100 per month minimum uniform for all residential customers, how much could we then reduce the base rate, which varies between customers? That would be my request.
Howard, are you suggesting that all residences would be a flat $100?
Pardon?
I'm just trying to understand. Are you requesting that all residences are a flat $100?
No,
or just those
no.
that are currently below 100 be moved up to 100?
No. What I'm saying is that your monthly bill, right now it has a kilowatt hour charge, and it has a monthly base rate based on AMU, based on past usage. If you had $100 minimum, that means if I don't use my electricity at Kirkwood every month, I'd still have to pay $100. But if I had a lower base rate and I used enough electricity to get up to the 100 minimum would have no impact on me. It's a little bit hard. It took me, when Bertrand first ran this idea by me, I could not understand it.
I'm sorry.
Didn't make sense. But what it really does is it says that we all have an electric system available to us. And if we use it or not, we still have to pay for it.
Yeah, I understand, but the current minimum is $60. Are you suggesting that move that up to 100?
There's a minimum charge, or
Yeah.
or are you
Yeah.
talking about?
It's currently $60.
No,
Are you
I'm
suggesting it would
talking,
be a?
no, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying if we reduced the charge per EDU, if we reduce the charge per EDU, but offset that by having just a flat monthly minimum for everybody. So make it I'm picking a round number of $100, but I'm saying that whether I come to Kirkwood or not, whether I winterize my place and disconnect my refrigerator so I have absolutely no usage, I'm still going to pay $100. But somebody who lives at Kirkwood full-time and uses $100 worth of electricity, they would pay $100. Actually, I mean, there would be a trade-off. So it would complicate things. It would make things a little more complex to analyze. But instead of saying that a customer would have a fixed AMU that they're going to pay each month, or EDU charge base, as we have it now, a base rate, that for just everybody, all residential, and I wouldn't want to test this on the commercial side because we have different considerations. $100 minimum would mean nothing to Vail Resorts. It would be nothing. But if we had 100, if on the residential side, we had $100 minimum bill. And if you don't understand the implication of it, I don't blame you, because it took me quite a bit of time to assimilate and internalize the difference. It's not obvious, but I could give you examples. You know, some country clubs will say, we've got a restaurant, whether you use it or not, there's a monthly minimum, but or a quarterly minimum. But if you get up to that amount, then you get up to that amount in food. But if you don't use it, you still have to pay to support the staff and the infrastructure.
I think if I could just try to summarize it, what you're proposing, to put it in the format that's on our screens right now, I think what you're proposing is a methodology to make it more general. Should we look at a methodology that reduces the burden on full-time residents, however that may be defined, and assures that all others pay some minimum, what you might call their fair share? Is that the general statement?
Yes. And I mean, I'd be willing to personally spend any time with staff to just, I could generate some examples, some spreadsheets maybe.
Well, Howard, if
it wasn't obvious.
Yeah, if the board wants to include that, then I think all this will go to the finance committee, and that's where that material could go. But I just want to note that you're proposing that we have a fifth item here that reduces the burden on full-time residents, however that may be defined, the monthly burden, and to assure that all others pay a certain minimum towards paying for the capacity that we are providing in our system.
Well,
is that right?
Not completely. First of all, what I'd like to propose is that the objectives be changed to completely delete number 6. That would be number 1.
Well, we're not going to do that right now. So what I want is, can you please summarize a potential number 5 for our consideration? What modification would you propose? I mean, you've gone into detail, which is great, but if you could generalize it, because what you're proposing is a specific solution. There may, if this is something that the board wants to tackle, there may be other ways of doing it as well. So what's the general statement? Can you, if you could summarize that, that would be great.
Okay, I would like the board to consider alternatives to the rate study that was developed that would be based on other ways of charging for the base amount, not based on past usage. That would be the most general statement of what I'm asking.
So that's not just a modification, that's a rework, right?
Okay, if you want to
Is
call
that
it
what, no,
that.
I'm asked, that's a question.
Yes,
That's a
Yes.
rework.
yes.
And that sounds a little bit different from what you were saying, what I was interpreting, which would be a number 5, which would be consider ways of reducing the monthly burden on full-time residents, however that might be defined, and assuring that all others pay, I'll just call it their fair share of our monthly, of our capacity costs. Is
Let
that
me,
what-
let me chime in a little bit here because I think I could help on that item 5, which is not a rework. It would be actually considering a minimum payment to the level maybe of $60 as a starter. That's why simulation would help is, let's see if we do a $60 minimum payment, how does that affect everybody? And what I think it's going to do is the people that come only a few times a year are still going to pay the minimum 60, but the people that are full-time residents would not pay the 60 because it'd be absorbed in their consumption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I think minimum payment, number 5 would be investigate how minimum payment could help full-time resident.
Okay, that's a good summary.
Yeah.
I hope somebody's written that down so we can consider it when we consider these items.
Yeah.
Did Doug have his hand up too? Did you say, Eric?
Yes.
Yes, he did.
Okay, Doug.
Cool, thank you. So, given the rate structure as it was designed, I mean, at a high level, there are always trade-offs with these rates. And I think there are ways that we could have done the rate differently that would absolve all of these, but would generate other issues in other places. Like if we recalculated the EDUs every year as well, like we could solve some of these issues, but there would be trade-offs and encouragement. So I think keeping that as a frame of reference is always helpful. And, Howard, I appreciate the thoughts, and Bertrand, your comments here. I think there are other things that we can potentially think about. But I would say as designed, I think it's gone a long way to helping us move forward. And I think these are 4 areas of concern. I will say, as someone who does fall into the new homeowner bucket, it is slightly stressful every time I turn my lights on to know that this could impact my base rate for my generations to come. Essentially, it is a little bit stressful, but I think those are the trade-offs that we make, and I think that's okay. And I think about what these 4 items are in a larger perspective in 2 ways. And one is that I think I would propose editing 1 and 4 to include electric vehicles. I think that says just propane and wood to electricity, but I would also say gasoline in a lot of ways. And I know that's not a utility that the KMPUD has something to do with, but I think number 4 as well would argue that has new construction, not just with electric heating, but also potentially an EV charger. And I think a lot of that doesn't have to do with the specifics of all the things you could enumerate that one could do in a household, but it comes back to what would we consider as quote unquote normal before someone makes a conversion. And I think that is a larger question that the board would need to think about if you decide to think about any of these topics. But I think in general, EV charging and is a concern to a lot of residents. We're having it in our own HOA about how this would work. And if we had to put our own meter in, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that our base rate would be very high if we wanted to have one public for all of our residents here and owners here. So there are lots of conversations around EV charging. And I just want to mention that being a part of these bullet points as something to be considered. The second isn't really related to, that's one high level of concept I would have with all 4 of these points, which again, I generally agree with. The other one I would just say is not really a regulation, but I mentioned this at a previous board meetings over the summer, and I think we heard it through some comments. And the thing that really concerns me going forward with the rate as designed, even with some of these amendments, is how people understand how this all works. And what especially new owners right now who are, as I think Bob outlined, if you bought, was it May 2019 and onwards, it's very confusing in some ways as to when does your period end, all these sorts of things. And I remember hearing a comment during the proceedings over the summer that someone was like, this is great. It goes, I'm a new owner and it goes from 66 down to 22. This is great. I can start doing all of these things that we're trying to enumerate here. But that's not necessarily true because that would catch up with them at a base rate. And I think that the board could think about this in two ways. One is, providing APIs to their own data. That's one way of customers could access and analyze their own data, understand how their usage will change over time. But I also think about the board being able to be a facilitator of strong communication, especially to new owners who are on these, periods of adjustment where their understanding of how their choices will be made, especially now without having anything in place with any of these 4 bullet points to be able to adjust. But being able to communicate, if you were to continue at your current usage levels, this is how this would affect your base rate, or this is how, here's how your usage projects for the periods, because you have 12 or 14 months left on your 3-year horizon. Things like that, I think that are more proactive will be helpful for people today, but also we will always have new owners. And, there were people who didn't hear the whole proceedings here and who are relatively new owners that will have to come into this. And this might not be the first thing to think about, because I don't think people come by here and wanting to think about their base rates and how their electricity usage changes over time. They want to take advantage of skiing and hiking and whatnot. So I think this is something that I think the district could be proactive in helping customers understand how this impacts them, especially as new people come in.
Okay, Doug. Thanks. A lot of that would fall into number 3, I think. It could be incorporated.
It could be incorporated, and certainly if you can get it incorporated more quickly. But I still think if you're going to have our rates over 3 years, I still just really need to know, like, this is when it ends, this is when it begins.
Yeah, right. The communication end of it, right?
Yeah, here's
right.
your beginning and end, right. And your decisions will impact this in this way. Those sorts of things I think are just really helpful if we can be more proactive to the extent that we can.
Yeah, and actually that's why I propose already a language revision on the ordinance, because it is very difficult for people to understand. I had multiple people totally confused on that. So I think, and that's why I wanted to, but I'm not going to bridge to that point now because it's the next topic. But I think revision of the ordinance would help there as well.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Doug, just so you know, the staff has that information. So when a customer calls, they can click in one place and it'll tell them all of that information. It could also be communicated outbound instead of waiting for them to call.
Yeah, and I think that's my concern, Bob, is just being on the proactive side, because my worry, and I think we heard this even through some of the comment periods, that someone was like, I don't know how I missed all of this over the last 9 months. And they've been an owner here for, a long time, and we've had all this and they missed all of this. And I would hate to have owners, I'd hate to have the board have to hear emails from customers being like, I've been living here for 2.5 years and I just found out that all of these decisions I've been making have been impacted. And again, if this is assuming that we don't have any of these mitigations in place at some point, who knows, this could all be moot because that will never happen. But that's just my general concern, is I'd hate to have people who've been living here for a while coming to us asking for petitions because they didn't understand. And I think that could be helpfully solved if it was a little bit more proactively noted as opposed to available if you ask.
Agreed.
Thanks, Doug. Are there any other public comments from other people? Not,
yes, there's a phone, the 530 number.
That's Anne-Fleur.
What was that? Someone on 530 number wishing to comment?
Yes.
I think she got disconnected.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. This is Anne-Fleur. I just wanted to chime in and echo a few of Howard's points. There's 3 of them in particular that I still feel really strongly about. The first one is that I think in looking at the big picture of the rates, that it's important to keep in mind with the goals that rates may need to change. Trying to keep them stable and implement change to make them more fair doesn't really work together. And so at some point, minimizing those changes and significant impacts on people is a valid concern. But I think that in broad strokes, it's important to remember if the system is broken and we want to fix it without impacting anybody, that's not going to work. So just something to keep in mind as you guys keep talking through all this. And then the second point was about the 3-year adjustment period. I also, as a new homeowner, think that this is something that I agree with Doug. It really needs to be communicated to people very clearly, and also thinking about ways to minimize the impacts on people, because if the goal is to get people to use more electricity, clearly people who are buying homes and understanding the impacts of this are going to try and not use any electricity for 3 years or 3+ years while they're in their assessment period. So I think that really warrants a further investigation, as you guys have brought up. I just wanted to echo that. And then thirdly, I'm still really concerned with the inequitable way the base rate is set up, and that it will, it's set up in a way that people will be paying different amounts for the same amount of electrical usage in the long run. And I don't think that makes sense or is fair. And so I continue to encourage you to look at other ways of working on the base rate or doing some kind of fixed base amount, as Howard was presenting. But I think that also warrants further investigation and to find a way that is more equitable to create that base rate and that base fee structure throughout. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Fleur. Okay. What I would like to know is, board, do we agree that items 1 through 4, with the possible addition of the EV item that Doug brought up, and then in item 5, which was I think summarized by Bertrand, are these items ones that we want to consider? And if so, I would suggest that we refer these to the Finance Committee, since there's a lot of finance involved with this stuff. So, board, what's your pleasure on that?
Yeah, I think I think we ought to consider all those. I also think as we get through a few billing periods, we might learn more as well. So I think this all should be considered by the Finance Committee,
including the number 5 that Howard suggested that Bertrand summarized.
Yeah, I think we should take a look at it. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Bob, any thoughts on that?
That sounds fine to me. Eric Christensen, I know you've done some analysis. Can you comment on how the change to the rates because of the EDU change from 716 to 230 affected Vail and commercial customers?
Yes, I did take a look at the aggregate of Vail, and they went from, I think, about 144 average per month to 160. So they actually saw about a 9% increase, I believe that's correct. I don't have a report in front of me.
What does the 144 and 160 refer to?
That's their average monthly bill of the aggregate of all the Vail accounts. So they actually saw an increase more than 7%.
Are there 3 zeros
before the 7% increase?
I'm sorry, Are there
Yeah,
3
three
zeros?
zeros behind that, yes.
Okay,
Sorry, I figured that without saying. Sorry about that. Yes, 144,000 to about a little over 160. So more than the 7% increase adopted by the boards. They actually saw their rates go up under the new rate study.
Right. So we did shift the burden, if you will, from residential to commercial through the EDU change. So that's one point. So, and what in terms of full-time use, how did that change?
In terms of full-time customers?
Well, or, people who are here a lot.
Yeah, people who are here, I think I asked you to define that as, I think about half the time, I think is what we said in terms of days of usage, like 180, I think is what
I think it was 180 average over the last 3 years, including COVID.
Yeah, so looking at those, there were 138 people that fall into the previous owner category. So 34 of them, or said another way, 4.4% of our total customer base saw an increase more than 10%. 90 of those previous owners saw an increase between 0 and 10%, and 14 saw a decrease. Then in terms of the permanent residents, there was, I think, 23 saw an increase, 40 saw no change, and 40, I guess actually take that back, so 70 saw a decrease. So it's a very, we're talking about 4.4% of our total customer base of permanent residents that actually were adversely affected.
okay,
There's just unique cases in there.
okay. Well, I would like just to go back now and give direction to staff and I guess the finance committee that there'd be items 1 through 5, the fifth one being.
Do you have comments? And I see another raised hand there, so I don't know if you want to open up.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Bertrand?
There's 2 things. I'd like to comment. Actually, I believe the item 4 belong to planning, because planning is doing the propane shifting. And it may end up in financing later, but the new construction, basically what I think we should look at is all electric, not only new construction, all electric. Anybody with new electric, all electric, old owners, conversion owner, new construction. This is what propane shifting is about. And I think that too should be part of planning at this stage. So we keep working the concept, and then later we'll go to finance.
Well, my understanding was I listened to your report from in September, and I thought you guys, the planning committee, decided that there should be no exceptions. And this was one area of exceptions that we had.
Actually, no, it didn't say no exception, it said no appeal process. The board, the planning committee.
Oh, okay. That's different from my understanding of what the board was asking.
Yeah.
The board was asking for drafted policies on exceptions, not an appeal process, but exceptions. One of the exceptions was specifically this one. And my understanding was the planning committee decided, as I think you said, a low priority and will be considered later if ever.
Actually, the planning shifting is exactly looking at the new construction with electrical heating. This is part of what we call propane shifting. What policy can we put in place to incentivize people moving to all electric instead of using propane, or incentivize people to convert from propane to electric?
Well, this is something that's going to have to be considered quickly because there is new construction. So it's not something that can be mulled over and the whole propane shifting and the much bigger topic. So this is a very specific thing for this ordinance.
Okay, we have planning committee where this is on the agenda on the 20th, I believe, and we'll try to come up with something at that meeting so we can push that back to the board.
Okay, into finance. I certainly have no problem with you
Not to finance, yeah.
Yeah, I certainly have no problem with planning committee doing
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
but also want this whole package of stuff to be considered in finance.
Okay.
So my question again is, do we want to ask the staff and finance committee to consider items 1 through 4 plus the item 5 that Howard proposed and you summarized? I mean, I would suggest
I
that
do.
I would suggest that we do want that to happen.
I do.
Okay. Bob, is that acceptable to you?
Well, I'm not the chair of finance.
Well, no, I'm just going through the board member. You're
Oh, I'm
first.
sorry.
You're first on my screen here.
Yeah, it all sounds fine.
John, is that acceptable to you?
Yes, yes, it is.
Peter, is that acceptable to you?
Yes.
Okay, and Bertrand said yes, and I said yes. So there's your direction. And just make sure you add that number 5.
Eric, you have one other public comment?
Oh, okay, sorry. Who's that?
Anton?
Oh, okay, Anton, yeah.
Hi there. So in his previous comment, Eric mentioned that 34 of the people who fell into the previous owner category would see an increase of 10% or more. I believe I captured that correctly. I just wanted to point out that, you know, when I've seen the comparisons from KMPUD that say this is your usage before and after, to me as a customer, those comparisons were not correct because they were comparing the unit's usage, not my usage. So my usage is very different from the previous owner's usage. And at this point in time, you know, I have enough data to see how much usage I have. So for me, even though when you guys run the kind of analytics, you might see maybe I fall into this sort of 10% or thereabouts, or maybe a bit more. My actual difference is going to be 35% more because I'm looking at my actual usage, not the unit's usage. So I just wanted to call out that point that, you know, that could get lost in the analysis, right? If you're analyzing how does a unit compare before and after this change, as opposed to the point in time when the unit changed hands and the new owner's usage pattern started taking effect.
Yeah, Anton, we're comparing it through the most current month just to see what it is. So we are looking at exactly what you suggested.
Okay.
And
the other thing that skipping the COVID year added a lot of time, which is unfortunate. That's what we're drawing attention to. The other thing is, because summer and winter usage is so different, if you take a period and you look at something that isn't exactly full years, then you could end up with 2 winters or 2 summers, and that really throws the data off.
Oh, that's understood, of course.
Yeah. But we recognize the situation. I just want to acknowledge that.
And my hope is that kind of situation is addressed in item 3 here.
Right, exactly. That's what we want to do.
Yeah, exactly. Anton, just so you know, I'm thinking of you whenever I hear this number 3.
Yeah, and so am I.
Yeah. Okay.
So
okay.
Actually, I'd like to make a comment for the finance committee to think about when it start working on that. It just does not make sense. I mean, I do understand we need to look at full year to make any AMU/EDU calculation because of the seasonal change. No problem with that. However, we should try to maximize the use of the new owner data. So if, for example, in the Anton case, he's been there 19 months at the time of the ordinance passage, and the 12 months are going to be ignored because of the pandemic. So he has 7 months actually that could be used, and the way it is done now, it is not used, and I think it's totally unfair. So we should take is 7 months, complete the year with the previous owner data and go with that. And that would be a much fairer assessment for him.
Oh, I'd love
And,
to
that,
do that.
and that's what I propose in my
Yeah, that's a,
ordinance. Yeah.
I would love to do that.
yeah, so that's a good
Absolutely.
transition. That's a
Yeah.
good transition into Bertrand's
Yeah.
comments. Can we move to that now?
Mhm.
And I'd like to do this in a couple ways. Well, first, I'd just like to take, because in section 2, you propose, Bertrand, some edits, some wording edits. So let's first take section 2. Can you go back to that, Eric, in the screen? Yeah. There were a handful of proposed edits, and I don't know how meaningful these. Maybe you could explain why you think they're important. But
Yes.
as I read through them, I just couldn't see that they changed meaning very much. Or, but anyway, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so actually, as I said, most of it is actually trying to clarify the ordinance so people can read it and make assessment for themselves. And I know, for example, if you look at section 7, we are mentioning that the EDU period is from April 1st to March 31st. And the reason we do that is to have time to actually make the changes before the new fiscal year starting July 1st. And I know that in section, we find it, earlier when we talk about, I think section C, it said that per ordinance 1601, the districtly currently calculate EDU for each customer from July 1st to June 30. But the fact is, we also say in the ordinance that the ordinance 2102, I believe, that we are working with, is superseding the 1601. So I think people, when they read the thing, think now the period is from April 1st. So the new EDU is going to apply then on April 1st, but it's not the case. It's going to apply on July 1st. And I have several people totally confused with that. So I think it's worth adding a sentence here to remind people this is when it's going to happen. Another example is what I just described, and that's in section 7 as well, is trying to maximize the use of the new owner whenever available. We should not require a full year of data from the new homeowner and discard these 7 months in this case that Anton has, because this is real data and there is no reason to ignore it. And it also allows, because if we do that, then someone we purchase in May almost have to wait 4 years to actually get out of this training session or purgatory or whatever you want to call
Bertrand,
that.
when it was originally programmed, that's the way we did it, but the ordinance didn't allow us to do that, so we had to back it out. So, but it would help all of us, because you're looking at specific wording changes, if we actually do it in the order of the wording changes so we can see it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
Because I really can't follow it.
Okay, I start from the beginning because some are very.
And whose screen are we looking? Eric, this is your screen, right? So.
Yeah, so let's just go to D, where the word should is proposed to be changed to the word could.
Can you make it a little bigger on the screen? Thank you. Okay, so here it's just semantic. Actually, I think that whole paragraph is useless because we actually talk about in detail later. So I'm not sure why we need to get this whole paragraph personally.
But I think we should focus on the least number of changes.
Okay, so in this case, as this one is just a semantic one, I think.
But we
It's just
did make it below 1, so the word should is what applies.
Yeah, it was a finding. It was definitely finding that we should do that.
So I wouldn't make it could, I would leave it as should.
As I said, just semantic. Go to the next one.
Okay.
I think it'd be clearer for people. I think that whole paragraph should go, but that's a different one. Here, E, section E. So we say, therefore, the district wish to encourage the use of renewable power, therefore. The fact is, this is the law of the land. We don't have a choice. We need to offer net metering. So I suggest to remove therefore and just say renewable generating system connected to the district electricity shall be subject to net energy metering. It's not a choice for the district to make, and I think therefore has no reason to be there. Next. Okay, here, actually, I have a problem here on the bigger problem that I didn't fix in my thing is the district has determined that revenue from electric service charge in any year will not exceed 105% of the district electric service and related cost for that year. So I believe what we want to talk about here is a cost. That's why I changed the and to an all. But actually, I would be much more comfortable if the district would say something like, the district is determined that revenue will not exceed 105% and will issue a credit to customer if ever it happens. Because I don't think we have a crystal ball to cover all the possible situations. And I am very uncomfortable saying we have determined and we know better. I think we should keep the door open and have a solution to address that.
We can't do that according to Rust regulations. So I think for the purpose of this discussion, we should limit wording the clarifications and not new policy.
Okay.
Well, plus, if I may say, so this 105% is related to the tier ratio.
Right.
And each year, every budgeting year, we have the option, considering how much cash we have, what the situation is, and so on. The board certainly has the option every year during the budgeting to reduce rates or whatever they may want to do. We certainly can't tie the hands of future boards to say this must be the case. The board may decide that the best way to get money back to people is to lower rates, is to reduce debt, for example, rather than doing what you suggest. In any case, that would be a whole policy change. It would have to go through Russ. That's not just a wording change.
I understand that. That's why I just changed the and to all, because I don't think the sentence makes sense with an and. It will not exceed 105% of the related cost of a related cost for the district electrical service. So anyway, on the 105%, I totally understand. On one hand, we are committed to collect 1.05% because of the tier ratio, but we are saying here it will never exceed that. And I think that's where we limit the board action. We are actually saying exactly what you say we should not do. We are saying that in any year, so it has to be 105 because of the tier ratio, but it will not exceed 105. That's a difficult exercise. I don't see why the ordinance should ask for that. I think we should have.
I see your point, Bridget. I think I see your point.
I think we should open the thing so the board can change things.
I think,
and just to be clear, Eric, these are findings. They have no impact on the ordinance. They are purely the whereases that you would normally see in a resolution. They are not the meat of it, nor do they implement policy. So just to be aware of, what we're dicing an atom over is really irrelevant.
Well, it still limits the board what can do. But anyway.
No, it doesn't. That's not a correct statement.
Okay. Let's move on to the next one. Actually, it does. It said that it will not exceed 105. So if we wanted to, for some reason,
it's
it
a
does.
finding, Bertrand. It's
Okay.
not, and part of it's the reasoning of the board behind the ordinance. The ordinance actually starts in section 3 of what is enforced. The finding is not what you're thinking it is.
Okay, section 3. Here it says at this meeting, I think there were so many meetings, and over time it'd be difficult for people to check exactly. I think we should just put which meeting date it is.
That's listed at the end of the ordinance already.
Okay. Yeah.
You skipped.
No, he's just showing you where it's
Okay.
listed.
Yeah.
Next, unpaid electrical service charge shall become delinquent at the same time. So the same time, the way I understand this thing, is all customer bills are payable upon presentation to the customer. So now I may misunderstand that, but I thought typically there is a due date on every invoice, and we are not delinquent until that due date. And so the way I read it, it looks like we are delinquent right at the presentation, even if there seems to be a grace period because there is no penalty until the due date. I just don't understand what the rationale here, and maybe someone can chime in.
Yeah, Eric, can you explain that?
Sure. This is language put in by Dick Shanahan, and it's the same. It just refers to the same. So we have uniform policies across all of our, because we only send out one bill for all utilities. So this is just links it back to water, which has the policy.
That doesn't answer to my point. My point is, I thought we are not delinquent until the due date.
I'm completely not understanding what you're asking. I'm sorry.
Okay, it says that the bill is payable upon presentation to the customer. So that means when we receive the bill.
No, it says unpaid electric service charges shall become delinquent and may be collected and enforced in the same manner as district water service charges. So you'd have to go back to that policy to see. It doesn't say that's delinquent upon receipt of the invoice, does it?
No, it said it's unpaid electric shall become delinquent at the same time. That's what it was saying. And the same time is a bill presentation.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And I think it's not at the bill presentation, it's after the due date.
Oh, what I interpreted the at the same, I linked the at the same time as the water service charges are required. No, there's not at the same time as the invoice, but at the same time as when the water service costs are.
No, it actually refers to, the sentence refers to shall become delinquent at the same time that they are unpaid. So when they're unpaid, they're delinquent. So.
Which is what the water policy is. I mean,
yes.
It's just linked to that.
Correct.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, it's not very clear, and I was trying to clarify that. Next. Actually, the fact that we have to go back to the water ordinance to know when we are past due sounds weird to me. It should be built into that ordinance. Section 7. So here I clarify that the EDU for people who are not crystallized, I mean, are still having collecting data, is changed on July 1st. That's the way I understood it. But I clearly had a lot of people confused with that. So I think it'd be worth adding a sentence reminding people that.
Oh, is that, anybody have a comment on that? Does that states the fact, right? The yearly revised EDU applies at the beginning of the following fiscal year, July 1st. Is that right? Eric?
Yes, that is right. And that is,
Is that stated elsewhere or is that?
Yes, it's stated elsewhere.
It's stated at the beginning in the description of the ordinance 1601.
There you have it.
But we also say that this ordinance is replacing 1601. So I think we should say it here as well. Again, try to make it easy for people.
Yeah, I mean, if it's an accurate statement, it seems reasonable to include it to me. Okay, next.
Okay, so that's where, and now I had no chance to respond to Bob, but I don't see why the rest would prevent us to use current owner data.
No, that has nothing to do with Russ at all. This is what I thought we agreed to as a board, but the ordinance as written didn't necessarily provide for it.
Oh, okay. So you agree with me that's what we should do?
I would love to do this, but I believe the way the ordinance was approved and written, we're not allowed to.
I agree, but we could change it.
This is the first place where there's actually a policy.
That's the only place.
This is the only place I believe where the policy is being changed. In my mind, it's being changed to reflect what I imagined it was supposed to be in my mind, but the actual wording didn't allow for this.
And it would fix people problem.
I would strongly support this, and I know that Eric and I did an analysis to verify the benefit.
So all the red mark here in these 4 lines, Bob, you're saying makes sense to you?
Well, let me just read it while other people are commenting.
I'm sorry?
I need to reread it.
Okay.
Sorry.
You said aloud.
Yeah, it isn't the prior owner's AMU, it's the prior owner's data for the months the current owner does not have data.
Yeah, actually, I didn't change that. Yeah.
Yeah, if it said that.
I think we could clean this up in finance, Bob, to reflect it.
But
the language is pretty clunky.
Let me just say for the other board members, this is really the right way to do it, the way I'd like to do it. And it's only because the ordinance didn't allow this that we had to do it the other way.
Yeah. So
I think of this as a blended data, that the new owner and the old owner's data gets blended together to make AMU years. And it says the new owner's effect happens, it can happen up to 11 months earlier by doing this. So I strongly would encourage us to do this if we can.
And can we sort of agree on that now, or does this need to go back to a public hearing process?
It's an ordinance, so it has to go through proper noticing and public hearing.
Okay. So this would go then to finance along with the other matters that we talked about earlier, and then come back to the board in a notice public hearing.
Correct.
Okay. Was that the end of it, or is there more here?
I don't know. Can you scroll? Okay, no, so that actually, there's one more thing on the name. So again, it didn't change the policy, it's just make it clearer, because I had a lot of trouble trying to understand how this was working. Actually, there is only 2 cases for named customer. Either they are entitled to an ROI or they are not. In the case of not being entitled, there's 2 situations. Either your system has been installed more than 10 years ago, or your system has been installed after the ordinance has passed. So I think that's section 1, and that's why I say, or after the effective date of the ordinance, then that basically combined what was 1 and 3 in this one. And also I'll add, because there is some confusion for some people between, for electrical usage and generation, is it at the meter? Is it at the panel? So I think by adding per district meter reading, which correspond that instantaneous generation and usage are not included, is a good clarification to have for people. So that be in the ordinance. And then I would add that same reference per district meter reading when we talk about the case number 2, where people have less than 10 years and are entitled to have basically a net energy metering. But again, this is at the district meter level, not their own generation and behind the meter. So that's a clarification. I think I also got questions that could help people understand how this works. And there'll be just 1 and 2, and 3 will be just removed altogether. Bob, what do you think?
I just think we should do the absolute minimum number of changes. And I think we're much better off writing a customer-friendly description than encouraging them to read the ordinance. But I mean, this is not a policy change, so.
It's not a policy change. It's a clarification. Yeah.
Right.
So Bob, you agree that if these words were changed, there would be no policy change at all, either implied or actual?
I think so, but I don't think well in a group setting, so.
Yeah, yeah, I tried to figure.
Double check it, but I think what we want to understand here, and then it can go to finance, is the only policy change we want to see, everything is clarification. The only policy change is on the AMU calculation, blending it with the previous owners, and that we want to minimize the number of wording changes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why. Since we have to change it, why not make it clear? So that would be my position. Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that too.
Yeah. I would not change it just for that, but if we do a change anyway, so it's hard to make it clearer. It's easy to make it clearer and to the benefit of everybody. I think that's the end. Can you check?
I believe it is. Okay, Bertrand, thanks.
Yeah, so again, only one policy change, everything else is semantic.
There is the deletion of section 3, which is not semantic.
It is okay. It is semantic because 3 is basically lumped into 1.
Yeah, my view when I read this was, even if you think it may be a little redundant, it actually makes things clearer. It's one of those things that I think provides clarity. Somebody can just read that and say, "Oh, okay."
Well, actually, I find it extremely confusing because it said that for number 3, which is basically people after the ordinance, new system solar, that it would not be based on electrical usage. Actually, that's the opposite. It would be based on electrical usage. We are saying the opposite of what we are going to do.
Well, I mean, what I thought it was saying was that for new solar customers, they don't get the benefit of the calculation that's being done for the previous solar customers. That's what I thought it. That's what I thought it said. I mean, that's the way I interpret it. That's what I thought it said.
When I read it, I understand the opposite. It said, like, okay, in number 1, we are saying people with more than 10 years, the RME calculation is based on electrical usage. That's what we said, case number 1. Case number 3, that we want to be the same than number 1, we say that it would not be based. So one we say would be based, and the other one is would not be based, and actually they are the same thing.
Eric, do you have a comment on that?
No, I disagree with his analysis, but I mean, if we want to word it clear.
I'm trying to, honestly, I'm trying to understand it. I mean, I actually just don't understand it. So what the intention here is clear. The intention is clear to me, but you know, maybe I just don't understand the definition of quote electric usage.
Yeah, Eric, I almost think what we're trying to say here would not be based on net usage, but on actual usage. I mean, the difference being subtracting out. We're not
Yes.
subtracting out.
I'd be fine with that change too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'd
could we
really
ju-
like to suggest, because I find that group editing can be painful and sometimes inaccurate, that we ask staff to incorporate these changes and run them by Dick, and then we would review them in finance.
Sounds perfect to me.
We don't need to take up time there. And our intention is the only policy change is the one we described on blending AMUs.
Yep.
I appreciate Bertrand's time carefully reading this and identifying things. That's always helpful.
Yeah, I'll just say that I didn't see much value in the edits in number 2, in section 2. I saw a lot of value in the edit in section 7. And now that I understand this other one in 8. So that's my point of view.
Okay. Well, if we can direct staff to
Okay, what I would like to do, I propose to directing staff is to pay attention to section 7 and 8, and not section 2. So that's my point of view. Bob, you would have all sections, all red marks considered?
I'm flexible. I'd have to, now that we've had the conversation, I'm looking forward to just going back and rereading everything.
Okay.
But I'm also comfortable if we tell staff to minimize the changes and focus on the one policy, I imagine that they'll.
Okay, that's what I would, okay, I'm fine with that. John, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I think the edits and the findings is important.
Okay, Peter?
Yeah, I think it's important to communicate with Dick Shanahan, and he could probably explain this a lot better than any of us as to why he worded it the way he did.
Okay.
Yeah. Since we are talking to Dick Shanahan, there is one thing at the end put here, but we are referring to bundle customer at one point into the, I think it's in section 8, but actually we don't have bundle customers. So I think that should be removed.
Yeah, the bundle customer part, yeah. Okay.
I disagree with the fact we should minimize the change. I think since we have to revise the thing, it doesn't hurt to make it readable for the normal people without having to.
Yeah, but some of your changes, Bertrand, are not.
I'm fine with some of, yeah, okay.
But Bertrand, some of those don't, I mean, like your word change from should to could and so on.
I'm fine. I agree with that. I agree with that. I think specifying, for example, that the EDU changed July 1st is valuable. And I know for a fact because people are lost.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's the direction then, is to
Eric, you have some audience comments?
Yeah,
okay.
Doug has his hand up.
Okay, Doug.
Sorry, just one quick comment. I think, a lot of the comments that we just talked about with Bertrand's edits do come back to what I was saying before about the customer-friendly communications of this. So I will underscore that again. One thought I had that is related to both this and the previous topic, though, and this could be moot because it can't be done, but I just was going to recommend that we think about if we make some changes, especially like the one that was redlined here, when is that effective? And if that gets backdated to the effectiveness of the ordinance originally, and so that we would credit customers back with decreases and changes or increases and changes. I don't know if it's even possible to do that, or it has to go into effect at the time of, but that was one thing that I think for any changes of any of the bullet points that we have, we need to be clear on what the effective date is, and we should consider implications, if possible, about backdating it and crediting customers to, if we think things were done incorrectly in a way that we can credit them back, we should potentially consider that. And I just want to make sure that was underscored as an agenda item to be considered when discussing all topics.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Okay, Eric, do you have direction?
I do.
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks for all this discussion, important discussion. And I think we can move on to the next agenda item. If I can just go back and find it. Okay.
Wastewater short-term financing, I think, is the next one up.
Okay. No, actually, district meetings is the next one.
Okay.
What is item E, or was item E, district meetings. So again, just as background, Peter spoke fairly forcefully on September 30th about the need to, or the desire at least, to open up the community building in some fashion. This gets to what I was mentioning at the beginning of the meeting. You know, can we establish a criterion or some criteria by which we agree that if conditions A, B, and C exist, then we can begin our in-person meetings? Can we open up the building for individuals to go into the building to pay their bills or whatever they may want to do with staff? That's what this item is about. So, Peter, I mean, do you want to repeat what you said on September 30th on this? Your thoughts?
I can remember that far back. I just think that as a public agency, we need to make ourselves as accessible as possible. When you look at the data that justifies having the state of emergency, that data could be interpreted to also that we live in the safest county in the state of California and possibly in the country. And with regard, if you look at the numbers, there hasn't been a single reported fatality that I'm aware of with regards to the pandemic. So I think it's incumbent upon us to come up with a policy that justifies the state of emergency, because I think we leave ourselves open to some challenges potentially. I think what the board expressed was a fear of passing the virus on to unvaccinated children. I think that was one of the main concerns. And I know that not many children go into our meetings, but they get indirect contact with people. So when we justify extending this state of emergency, I think the expectation is that by January, they're going to start vaccinating some of these kids under the age of 11, and that should reduce some of the necessity for us to be so isolated. People carry vaccination cards around with them. I may not carry mine in my wallet. You could use that as an admission to the building.
Oh,
does that answer your question, or is there something else?
No. That's kind of what you said before, and I just wanted you to repeat it for others. So let me just give a couple thoughts. Number one, I think that if individuals coming into the building are masked, then I mean that's what's happening all over, right? Into retail establishments and to all kinds of places now, that as long as you're masked, that should be okay. It seems to me that should be okay. I don't think that there's a real heavy flow of traffic. Is there daily into the PUD building, the community building?
No, I think it's probably one customer every other week when we were before COVID.
Yeah. So it seems to me that, you know, not having to ring the doorbell, not having to wait for somebody to come down, and basically that also means somebody from staff has to get up and leave whatever they're doing, would be helpful and would make the building feel more open. It would be more open to individuals as long as they're masked. But for group gatherings, it seems to me that like for the PUD meetings, it would be miserable to have PUD meetings with everybody have masks on. it'd be difficult to talk. It'd be difficult for people on Zoom to hear. So I think that my point of view is that once the masking requirement or recommendation is lifted, and by the way, this is coming close in 8 or 9 Bay Area counties now. Once that's lifted, then I think that is sort of an objective criterion by which we can say, okay, it's now safe for us to do the same. Another criterion might simply be recommendation from Dr. Johnson, although it's not just Alpine County, it's Amador County, and I don't think Amador has been one of the safest counties in the country. I think Alpine has been, but I don't think Amador has been. So I don't know, I would like to come up with a criterion or some criteria that we agree on that says, okay, if that happens, then we can begin group meetings. But I would propose that we allow individuals, as long as they're masked, to come inside the building to conduct business.
It sounds good to me.
I mean, I know that there was some concern on staff's part, but about children and so on. But I think that that can be mitigated with the masking. I understand that Terry has her hand up to make comment. Hi, Terry.
Hi. I just wanted to say that we did have one death, our very first death in Alpine County. So I just wanted to let you know if you hadn't heard, but
thank you.
That's all. Just one.
Okay, Terry, thank you. Thanks very much. So I don't know, can we agree on something along those lines, or can we agree that it's okay to open up the building for individuals as long as they are masked?
Howard has his hand up too, by the way.
Howard did you say?
Yeah.
Okay, Howard.
Yeah, along these lines, I just wondered if going forward, it would be possible that these meetings, the board meetings, be in kind of a hybrid mode where people could come in and Zoom in addition to being present.
That is definitely the idea. Eric just mentioned
we're working on the technology right now. We've been running some tests. They were very unsuccessful. We are going to have to upgrade our Zoom license, and we think that will resolve the issue, and possibly the purchase of a rather expensive microphone if that supplemental Zoom rooms package does not solve the problem, to the tune of about $7,000 for the microphone. So staff's working on it, and we did run some tests Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we'll keep at it to facilitate the hybrids.
Yeah, so I'm just going to make a proposal to see what you guys think.
Well, I think I'd like to put a lot of heavy weight on what the staff wants, because it is true that you can go into retail establishments or the grocery store. If you've got a mask on, you could do that. But I think people with small children might opt not to do that. And so I'd like the staff to have a pretty strong vote in opening up the building if they feel comfortable with that. I'd endorse it if they feel that that's a exposure for their kids. I totally understand that too. It's probably just because I have my little grandson here right now, and we're like super careful because of him. And if it wasn't for him, I would be out and about quite a bit more. So, so I'd like to have the staff have a strong input on that.
Well, myself, I hope that we can have this hybrid technology up and running sooner rather than later. As far as masking, access for masked people, this is what I see everywhere now. I don't understand why in Kirkwood, where we are actually very one of the best in the country. Yes, I know Amador is not as good, but this is Amador in Jackson, not Amador in Kirkwood. I don't see any rationale to keep the building closed But I do agree with the requirement for mask.
Just to be clear, the building's not closed.
No, I know. I mean, okay, you
Just to
need
be
to
clear.
knock. It's not okay. Not freely available. And it's not that we have huge traffic anyway. You are talking about one customer every other week. But it's about, I mean, this is a building that actually belongs to the community. And I think people should be able to go there for valid reason indeed. And but I do agree that masking should be required.
So I have two questions. One is of Terry. What is Alpine County doing as far as individuals coming into county buildings?
They have to be masked.
But they are able to come in and conduct
Yes.
business
Yes.
as individuals.
Yes, they just have to be masked.
Yeah. Okay. And the second is, what is our staff's point of view of this on this as far as safety goes?
I'll conduct a meeting to get their consensus, and I'll be happy to share that. I don't want to misrepresent anything until I've actually talked to all of them about this idea.
Sure. Okay. Well, I think that, well, maybe we, I don't know how we make a final decision, but on this, but it just seems to me that if the traffic is minimal and if it's individuals and their masks, we should be able to have individuals be able to go into the building and conduct business. If that's what Alpine County is doing, I just see that, as it was stated, I see that happening all over now. I don't think we should have group meetings of any kind until, my personal opinion is, until masking is no longer recommended or required or recommended. And that we,
Eric, the only thing I wanted to add to that is Alpine County does not have their restrooms open to the public. So if we're going to open up, the board should probably opine on that. We would probably want to follow their lead and not have the restrooms open to the public as well.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, I would like to follow the county's lead on that, on the individuals and on the restrooms. But I don't think there should be group meetings until masking is a thing of the past and we have the technology set up. So that's my opinion.
As far as criteria, I suggest that we follow the CDC recommendation.
Or the California Public Health,
yeah.
Perhaps.
One or the other, yeah.
California Public Health. Bob, John, any more thoughts on this? I mean, I want to be sensitive to the staff's needs. I don't want the staff to be overly conservative, though. I mean, I don't know how else to state it. I mean, it is a community building. So Eric, perhaps you could poll the staff, and why don't we do this? Eric, why don't you poll the staff, and if it's okay with the rest of the board members, you, John, and I as personnel committee could make a decision on it.
That sounds good. I can do that.
Okay. Was that okay with the other board members?
Sounds good.
I have a problem with it. I think this is a norm everywhere we go. People, I understand for the restroom. I agree with that. I think it's time to open the building for masked people, like we do, like everywhere in Alpine, in YOLO, in. I don't understand why, especially in our place, which is very protected. I mean, they are very. I mean, they're based on the statistics. Huh? Why do we have to be the last one to open?
Yes, I agree with you, Bertrand, but I also want to be sensitive to staff's perspective on it. So
I mean, if it's really one customer every 2 weeks, this is a long discussion over a pretty
well, delivery driver.
So I
they get deliveries.
If you don't want to take the staff's consideration in, then we could just say open up the building without the restrooms to people wearing masks. I mean, it's not that high. it's not that high of a occurrence of people coming into the building anyway. I just thought it was good to at least ask the staff and make sure they're comfortable with it.
When this came up before, there was a semi-emotional response from one of the staff members, and I just wanted to be sensitive to that.
Yeah.
That's all. And I don't think, I mean, I think that there would have to be good reason not to do it. And so I would suggest, because I don't want to wait till November, November board meeting, when this can be resolved probably in several days' time. Just give Eric a chance to pull the staff, have him talk to John and me, and we can make a decision if that's okay with the board. Understanding with the board's predilection to open things up.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. Okay, Eric, if you could do that for us, that'd be great.
Will do.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's go on to the next one, which is item F, wastewater treatment plant financing. This is an update.
Can we have a 5-minute break?
Okay, let's see, what time is it? It's
11.
It's now 11.
No, it's 10:55 at 11.
Yeah, 5-minute break until 11 o'clock.
Yeah. Thank you.
Everybody stay connected.
Yes.
Rick, you can pause the recording if you want.
Back yet?
I'm Eric.
Hey, Rick.
There you are. Hi, Peter.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, we're recording again. Okay, good. Let's see. This is the wastewater treatment plant financing update.
Yeah, so I'll walk through this, and then Eric, you can add comments if I miss something. The financing's still on a positive track, but did run into a delay. RUS responded that their fiscal year 2021 funds were exhausted. And so we need to get funded out of fiscal year 2022. And so I had calls with our local RUS representative, Tanya, and with our placement agent, Stiefel, and with CoBank, our commercial lender, and Jones Hall as well with David Fama. So it's all in pretty good shape. It is a delay. So I asked about, when would those funds be released? And Tanya couldn't really tell me when they'd be released, but she says they do get their funding with or without an approved budget. So their funding is basically guaranteed, and that they would be able to continue with these types of loans as long as there was at least a government continuance. So at the time, we were a little worried about a government shutdown. Obviously, if they weren't at work, they couldn't process these types of loans. But if they're at work, they should be receiving funds. The way this worked is when we applied, the local funds were exhausted, so it went back to a request to national. National didn't have the funds as well. Now, when the fiscal year 2022 funds are released locally for our state, they'll be able to make that decision locally. Tanya was very bullish on us getting the loan. She said we're shovel ready. That's good. She already has the commitment letter drafted. And so I think she feels pretty positive, and it's just really no action required on our part, just to keep touch with her. And I did touch base with her yesterday, and she didn't have an update as far as when she received her fiscal year 2022 funds, but we are staying on top of it, but there's not any additional work we need to do. So then I talked with Stiefel, our placement agent, and also with CoBank, who's our commercial lender, to see how is this going to impact their participation, their loan to us. And CoBank said they were totally interested. They're staying on board, not really concerned. And I think that is partially because, the advice we had gotten is that CoBank has done quite a bit of those RUS loan paybacks, and they're pretty resilient in understanding of the RUS process. So So they're still on board. No really any further action to do there. I would say if there was an exposure, it would be, an interest rate change. If we saw this drag out longer and there was some increase in interest rates, they might propose that, but right now that isn't what they suggested. So basically, there's no real action on our part except for continuing to check in with Tanya and make sure that we understand when they're going to get funding, and then continue to keep CoBank up to speed. And Stiefel, Eric McKean at Stiefel has been really helpful in the process, and of course David Fahm has been helpful as well. Eric, did I miss anything, or anything you'd like to add?
I think the only thing I would add to that is that it wasn't that the funds were exhausted by the time our application went in. It was the additional requirements put upon us and the delays introduced by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Wilton Tribe of Miwok Indians at the 11th hour that pushed our basically that needed to be resolved by USDA internally, and that's what really drug it out towards the end.
Yeah, that's good clarification. Yep.
Howard has his hand up, Eric.
Howard?
Yes. So one question I have, and pardon me if this has been answered at some point in a previous meeting, but the report for the feasibility study had a total budget of 3.65 million, although the report did not have the customary line items that most reports like this would have for engineering and contingency. But I wondered how we got from 3.65 up to 7.5.
Yeah, Eric, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, you're looking at the 2018 feasibility versus the preliminary engineering report, which came out much more recent. So there's actually, this went through finance end of the board quite a few months ago. There's a very detailed report that answers all of those questions. So I'd encourage you to go look at that. And if you can't find it, let me know. I'm happy to send it.
Yes, could you send that? I'd appreciate it.
Will do.
Yeah, probably one more thing I should add is, it's always good to have a contingency plan. So I did set up a meeting with iBank, which also can provide funding for this type of a project. I don't think we'll end up following through and having to take advantage of that with iBank, but at least I want to have a conversation there and understand, what an alternative might be if we're going to run into a longer term problem with the RUS funding. But I don't think that'll happen, but it is a contingency that I wanted to explore.
Great. That's good.
John, we should probably explain iBank is a state of California entity under the Treasurer's Office that provides loans for these purposes.
Thanks. I should have said that.
So does this mean we can start doing repairs this year or not?
Probably unlikely.
Probably unlikely because you don't feel comfortable with the risk, or because
we may not get reimbursed if we start ahead of the letter of obligation.
So realistically, when do you think we can start the repairs?
Early next year for the internal portions of the projects. At least get them out to bid.
Like in the spring, maybe?
It might even be January, February, if depends on how fast the state moves.
Okay.
Or the feds move, I mean.
All right.
Any other questions on this discussion? Okay, if not, we'll go on to item I, which is the KCA Community Roadmap. So it's just as background, the Economic Development Group has kind of evolved at this point. You may remember that Bruce Gianola of KCA kind of took leadership of the economic development sessions, tried to organize it into some committees and so on and so forth. And then, of course, the pandemic came along, and also Bruce and Cheryl moved out of the community. Some months ago, Eric and I asked Dolan Beckel, who's now president of KCA board, if KCA would like to take the leadership position for continued economic development discussions. And Dolan basically said yes. And in fact, KCA has developed a sort of strategic roadmap. And he would love to have that roadmap become more of a community-wide roadmap. So to that end, he organized a meeting between the PUD, namely Bertrand as chair of planning, me and Eric, Gary Dirk from the development group, Matt Jones from Vail, and then KCA, there was Dolan and another board member. So we had a 2 or 3 hour long conversation looking at the roadmap and suggesting, inserting some aspects that the PUD is working on that we've already talked about are high priority for us. And that developed into a chart, a graph, a table of strategic initiatives. Dolan asked if he could publish that on the KCA website. And I asked him to hold off until the full board, our full board, had a chance to look at the parts that Bertrand and I and Eric had inserted that would be KMPUD centered before he did that. He agreed. So that's why this is here. And you can see that in the 4th row down, there's a category called community physical infrastructure and public utilities, which is primarily KMPUD items. And then there are some other items that are under the joint of what he calls improved governance and other wicked issues joint. And there's some things like electric vehicle charging there. But so what we had inserted, asked to be inserted into this table, you can see it was the upgrading of the wastewater treatment plant, the water system analysis and well upgrade, the propane analysis and policy updates, fire response funding, and promote energy efficiency. And then under the last row, let's see, we have the electric vehicle charging, the things that would particularly involve us. I mean, we would be involved with all the ideas that we might be involved with many of these things in the bottom row, but there are a couple that are specific to us. Probably electric vehicle charging is one of those, for example. So this is the roadmap that he wanted to publish onto the KCA website. And if there's agreement amongst the board about the items that we've contributed, then we would give him the okay to do that. There may be some other things we might want to add. Maybe particularly because of the wildfires we just experienced, maybe there's something along those lines.
I think fire prevention would be real important. Fire prevention / fuel reduction.
Yes, and I think we could add that. We could
KCA is with that, the better.
Okay, so wildfire protection and fuel reduction. That's what you said, right, Peter?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be one that would be added to this row, and that would be a high priority, I assume, a very high priority item. Is there anything else that people would like to add, or do you have any other comments on?
Eric, my problem is not knowing why this was in the agenda and just reading this. Because the difference between KCA and just KC is one letter.
KC.
Yeah, the title, Kirkwood Community.
Oh,
I just thought that they thought this was their roadmap. So
no,
I have a problem with the way it's labeled, creating the impression that this is the KCA roadmap. And I'd like to see that fixed.
Okay. Do you have a suggestion? Just say
no.
community?
It's only as you're talking that I finally figured out what we're looking at.
I see.
Yeah.
Can we just add wide, Kirkwood community wide priority roadmap?
Would that help?
Well, yeah, I think it would help. I'd rather think about it a little bit, but also if we're going to publish it, we could put it on our own website as well.
Sure, we could. Yes, and I'm sure Dolan would love that, to have that happen.
What do we call the strategic planning group?
Say again, Bob, I didn't understand.
Well, the economic development group, isn't it the economic development group roadmap?
Yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean,
Anyway, I don't want us to lose a lot of time today.
yeah,
but
I'll just
like to think about that.
I'll just emphasize that what Dolan was striving for, and which I think those of us who are participating agreed with, is that a roadmap that begins to integrate across the entire community.
I love it. Yeah.
That was the idea. So it becomes, yes, it's economic development. I mean, in the end, it's all economic development, I guess, but it's also more than that. You know, it's not just economic
I'm
development.
just saying a name that's durable, that implies the whole community.
Okay.
I'll be fine with Kirkwood Economic Development Group or whatever. I still think Kirkwood should be there.
Okay. I will talk to Dolan about that.
So I have one comment that worries me a little bit is there is this little section, divest KCA municipal responsibilities. So historically, actually, KCA was actually created just for that. And they had this franchise tax of 3.5% that was added to any transaction in Alpine County, I believe, not in Amador, if I may be mistaken here. And to help them basically, and they are responsible to paving KMD and stuff like that. So my concern is, and I think Dolan's vision is at some point there'll be a manager, I don't want to call it a mayor because we are not a city, but someone that would actually run this thing outside of KCA. And potentially would lead to incorporation of Kirkwood Valley. So what I want people to be clear is, this is about money also. Currently, the PUD is collecting the tax allocation from the 3 counties, and we basically have spoken for this money for years to come with all our infrastructure projects. So that means if we are going to integrate and they need money and finance to be able to operate, that means we need to have a source of additional money because the current money is being spoken for decades again ahead of us. So I'm a bit concerned on that angle, and I'd like to have clarification on what the vision on that, knowing that KMPUD is currently the recipient and doling out the money for the community, and how would that be impacted in the future, and how would that impact KMPUD infra projects?
Yeah, when that was discussed in our little group, Bertrand, you may remember that, well, you know, I didn't want to be the wet blanket on the topic.
Yeah, I remember.
Because, you know, we've explored that in the past. I think Terry Woodrow knows we've explored that in the past. It's a very difficult road to go down.
Yeah.
So what I saw what I realistically see is that the different entities in the community, namely the resort, KCA, PUD, the developer, the HOAs, all kind of have a same general vision and are working on things in some, at least we're aware of what each other is working on. And we would love to know more, for example, what Vail would like to do. They can only tell us so much because they're a corporate entity, but nevertheless, we would like to know whatever they could do. You know, certainly KCA would like to know what we're doing, and we'd love to know what KCA is up to. And, you know, so I see it more as that, which is not nearly what some of the people in that meeting were talking about, because I just don't, to be honest, I don't think it's realistic. But I didn't want to be a wet blanket and say, oh no, that'll never work.
No,
I mean, yeah.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
It's a great tool for communication, and we'll see where it goes. And at some point, maybe there'll be integrations, but I was a bit concerned about how much Dolan was pushing to have a manager because there is a cost to it.
Yes, there would be, yes. But at this point, what I just want to do is be able to say, that we're part of this, that we agree that we should at least know what each other is aiming for, that they should kind of be pulling in the same direction. And so what I've got to add now is a title. I talked to Dolan about that, and also adding the wildfire prevention and fuel reduction as a very high priority.
And I see someone raising hand at the top.
Oh, let's see. Rick, are you in control now? Has Eric left?
No, Eric's still on board.
Oh, Eric.
Still here for a hot minute.
Okay, do you see somebody's hand up?
Yeah. It's the phone in.
It's
Enflor. That's Enflor? Okay, Enflor. Enflor, can you?
Enflor?
You're on mute.
Okay, trying the *6 again. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I guess I pressed *6 too soon the first time. I just wanted to comment on two things. I think that this working together as a community to make plans like this is so critical for the future of the community. There's two pieces that I am specifically working on currently. One is the defensible space side, and we've gathered a great committee of people to work on Firewise as a community-wide, across county boundaries effort. So I think that that's a piece that can definitely help as we move it forward. Coordinate with efforts the PUD's making and any other efforts other entities in the community are making, and that is clearly a high priority. And the second one I see a slight mention of here, but I think deserves more attention, is the school. And we're also putting together a committee of people who are interested and determined to have a school in Kirkwood again, including myself. And we are gaining momentum on that and starting to move things forward to make it a reality, with kind of a 2-year plan of having a permanent school in Kirkwood. And so I think that that's something we are going to need community-wide support from. And so would like that to people to be aware of the importance of that, and that there's a lot of people, a lot of families that are interested in being able to build more community and be in Kirkwood full time. And the one barrier to that is the school. So we're working on making that a reality.
And do you have a suggested thing to say about school with this?
Well, I think that there's just one small thing at the end, at the bottom, far right, about supporting some kind of school activities, but I think that could be a much stronger box of working towards having an in-Valley school for the families that are here full-time now and those that would like to be here full-time. Got it.
I'll work with you.
Basically, I think we should raise the importance level of that. Now it's at the lowest level, and it's critical peg actually for economic development is for people to be able to live with their children here.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be an amazing development for Kirkwood.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I will talk to Dolan about these changes and additions, and then give him the green light to put it on the website. And we could put it on to our website as well, if we choose. Okay. Sorry, the sun is hitting me just wrong, so I can't really see things very well. So give me a moment to get back to an agenda. I think we're at manager's report, which Rick may give in lieu of Eric. Is that where we are on the agenda?
Yes. So it looks like we lost Eric, of course. And so I'll just jump into basically my report and kind of combine the two, if you don't mind.
Okay.
For Caldor fire, the fire is actually 98% contained. Total acres burned was 221,775 acres, with over 1,000 structures lost, which was just devastating. Luckily for us in the Kirkwood area, as you know, we got through, and our biggest concern now is just access to Kirkwood along the highway, along the burn area between Silver Lake, especially around the Carson Spur, where the gas X system up above was damaged due to the fire. So there's going to be a lot of emergency construction work on that system to get it up and running for this winter, as well as addressing hazardous trees and debris from the fire that could fall into the highway and or to the culverts of the highway, which would cause additional issues for us. So I would imagine for the next couple of months, you're going to see a lot of single lane closures along Highway 88, especially on the west side. There was some damage also on the east side near the Cables Lake Caltrans maintenance station. So we'll anticipate seeing again some delays in single lane road closures for a little bit for the next few weeks or months. I also want to say on behalf of the fire department, thank you to this board and to the community for the generous donations we've been receiving. The latest count is just during the Caldor incident, we received over $160,000 of donations. And today we're going to have an appreciation, or I'm sorry, the KCA will be having an appreciation, a community appreciation for the fire department this afternoon at the rec center. And again, the fire department appreciates it, the volunteers appreciates it. And again, we just want to say thank you. I also want to say thank you to Eastern Alpine County Fire, who was a tremendous support during the Caldor fire. The interface, the operations side, the personnel side of things went really well, and including tremendous support from the Alpine County Sheriff's Department during the incident. So again, thank you to Alpine County. As well as Amador County, we did have several members from Amador County Sheriff's Department tour the valley on a regular basis to secure the valley for us, as well as work with us as a liaison for keeping this valley safe and secure. So again, thank you to all there. And I'm going to leave my report for Caldor Fire at that. I'll bring more back to Operations Committee about lessons learned and some of the things I think we can do to improve in the future. Hopefully we'll never have to see this event again near Kirkwood, but we're certainly going to prepare for it internally for the district as well as for the fire department. But is there any questions from the board about the event?
Is there any update on the closures and so on, the announcement? I know that there's an announcement that said that there's no intention to close Kirkwood to the ski season and so on once there's moisture on the ground, but any updates on that?
I have not heard any Forest Service updates for closures. Like you, I've seen things on social media as well as in the news about the resorts will still probably be able to operate and continue this winter. You know, luckily this resort, Kirkwood Resort, was not damaged, but Sierra Tahoe had significant damage with some chairs as well as some of their structures. And if Terry Woodrow knows more information about forest closures, I welcome her to chime in, but I have not heard anything just yet.
Well, I understand that there still are forest closures in the El Dorado National Forest. I just got people asking me they wanted to fish up at Blue Lakes and the gates were closed, and that's because of the forest closure. I haven't heard of when they're going to open it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess right now I'm optimistic about the ski season in Kirkwood. But fingers crossed, obviously.
I'd like to make a comment on that topic actually. So when this closure came up, right away there was actually well interacted with the Forest Service to make sure that they would be able to operate. And the Forest Service came forward publicly at a meeting saying they had no intention to prevent the season. My concern here is PUD is another big actor in Kirkwood, and we actually are impacted financially by the decision of the Forest Service. And so I think maybe, I don't know if it's a general manager, probably that's what I think should be the best, should also contact the Forest Service so they know we exist as an entity with financial involvement.
That's a good thought. And maybe Rick, you could follow up on that. Just
we are in contact with Forest Service almost on a weekly basis due to our power line and the impact of the fire of the power line, along with the rehabilitation of the forest, the crews that have been in here recreating culverts and so forth. So I'll certainly remind them of that. I'll have Eric also chime in on that or check in with Forest Service as well. But that's a good idea, Bertrand.
Rick, I had one other question for you. When I drove up yesterday on 88, I saw some really large earth moving equipment that was in the vicinity of our buried lines. Do they have a real good knowledge of where our lines are?
Yes, we actually marked the fire line before the fire, and then throughout the fire we maintain the markings, and so they are very familiar with our power line, as well as Volcano's fiber line, which we rely on as well.
Right. Okay, thanks. When you said a system was damaged at the spur, I didn't quite understand what system that is.
Oh, I'm sorry. The GasX system is the propane avalanche control system that's up on the ridge.
Okay.
And so
thank you.
The main facility for that was okay, but the poly lines that carry the propane to the individual tubes that you might see when you look up there, those actually melted and burned. So they're repairing those.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else in the operations and general managers reports, Rick?
So shifting away from Caldor Fire, I'm pleased to announce that we did hire a electric and propane department manager, and that person is Tommy Baggett, who we pulled from our accounting department.
Well, Kelly must be thrilled.
Yes. But Tommy's shown an extreme attention to detail. His managerial organizational skills, I think, are going to be a huge asset for us. And so his first week has been complete, and we look forward for him and Brandy Benson to work closely together to get that department completely dialed in so Brandy can refocus on the other operations. And then with his changing of positions, we've had an opening for his position. And so I'm pleased to announce that Amy Pfeiffer Johnson is taking that role for the district. And as you know, Amy's also got an excellent attention to detail. She's been our accounts payable person for years. And so it's exciting to see district staff promote within. And so we'll be announcing a new opening for the administrative side to help support our team. So some good moves there, and we're very excited for both of those employees.
Yeah, congratulations to Tommy and Amy.
And then the only other thing that I have operational as well as just management is I'd like to have Brandy Benson give us a brief recap of our summer projects list. And that was sent out in the supplement number 2. And I don't think I have that readily available, but I can certainly try to dig it out if anybody wants it. But Brandy, you want to give us an update?
Sure thing. So what we've given you here is just an overview, as I'm sure you expect, due to some issues with sourcing materials delays from due to COVID, but also the 2 weeks that we were locked out because of the fire. We've had some deferred projects. The other thing that's contributed to this is our staff, mostly our construction staff, spent significantly longer on playground construction than we anticipated. So I've given you here just a list of deferred projects. And this is what, we have not gotten to yet that we had hoped to get to this summer. Not to say if the weather decides to cooperate and we get kind of an Indian summer thing, we wouldn't continue working on these. But this is where we're at right now. So the main things that we are not going to get to, we were working on installing blow-offs for all of the leach fields in the parking lots. That's not going to happen. It's significant earthwork. We're just not going to be able to get to that. Also, for the electric department, we've been down a staff member most of the summer, replacing an LJE with a riser vault and replacing a transformer. Those are not safety issues. They're just improvements to infrastructure that will delay until next summer. Lastly, the propane 10% change out. We will get a few meters changed out this summer, but most of those will be delayed as well. So the board can just see, what we've gotten done this summer with our staff, what we have not done, and what we're still hoping to get done.
Great, thanks, Brandy.
Yeah, I have a question. Have you had the chance to get together with the Forest Service to assess any hazard trees on our overhead line?
Rick was able to do that early in the summer. We are due to go back out, not with the Forest Service, but with our forester and timber harvester to take down the trees this fall. It's going to be something that we give our list to the Forest Service based on our updated procedures from last year, and then we take those down. Chipping on the Out Valley line is still something that we have not been able to get a contractor to do yet. So that is still something that we're working on.
Approximately how many trees do you plan to cut? Do you have any idea?
I believe the list from earlier this summer, and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was about 8 to 10.
That's correct.
Okay. And then you have, how many of the PAM-type lids were we able to get in?
We replaced 5 lids, which included 2 rehabs. So one over in the base camp area, it was a buried manhole, so it actually had to be lifted up to surface level and the new risers and lid installed. But most of them were just purely installation of the new lids.
So that should help with our infiltration program, right?
Yes, it should.
Okay. And what about, we had talked about contracting out, replacing a sewer main down near Wintergreen that it was constantly realigned. Is that project bold for the summer or no?
It is unlikely. We have the documents to go out to bid, but being delayed and being so late in the year, it's unlikely we will get it done before spring melt. But we'll continue to work on that to get a contract lined up.
Okay. And then probably do it next summer.
Correct. As early in the summer as possible. If we can get that, lined up before the snow melts, then we'll get on it in June or so.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments on this item? And does that end your report, Rick?
That ends my report. Thank you.
Great, thanks. We go to standing committee reports. Finance.
Yeah, we met. We're continue to bird dog the financing. We're also looking at opportunities with state or federal appropriations or grants. So we're looking into that. And then we've got a number of to-do items out of this meeting with regard to the electric rate study. Bob, anything I'm leaving out?
No, I think that's it.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Planning. John.
So on planning, we are working on 4 topics currently: wildfire prevention and fuel, reductions, EV charging, both. We are a bit waiting here because we need some assessment for the capacity and the structure that we have in the valley to be able to move forward on the specific project. But we also look further at the district having actually its own EV station. And then the third topic that we have is how are we going to use the PGC, Public Good Charge Fund, that are being collected currently, with actually having a plan ready for July 2022, when the money will be available. And number 4 is propane shifting. So it is actually a lot of work on those things. So what we did last time is we split it to have a lead from the planning committee on each of this topic. Peter is going to lead the wildfire prevention, fuel reduction. Howard is going to lead the EV charging project. Patrick O'Donnell is going to lead the use of the PGC fund, and myself, I'm leading the propane shifting. So the one thing also that we need, and I'll have to get some, probably the board to open on that, is we need to have support from, I would say, typically I would like to have basically one person from the staff that each of these leads could actually contact to ask questions. And as of now, we don't have much support yet from the staff, so I think we need to improve that.
Okay, thank you. Operations?
We haven't met since the last meeting. We're going to meet the last week of the month and be able to give you an update at the next meeting.
Thanks, Ben. Communications?
At our last meeting, we focused on the voluntary renewables and propane offset program. So that went out. To date, we've had 19 customers purchase renewable electricity for the period that ended in July, and 15 that did propane. That's about a third of what we had last year. So we'll send out another reminder. We have a meeting this week. One of my proposals is going to be that we create a seminar series that maybe we do once a quarter on fire safety. And I've checked with state officials. They're willing to present what's the overall plan for protecting the forests going forward. Obviously, we could have the Firewise present. So my thought is maybe we could turn it into just an ongoing series that would be in the evening, would be recorded, and we could use the Caldor fire and all this experience and Rick's expertise and Ann Flores and others to try to turn this into an ongoing communications program. So that's one of
nice. Very, very nice.
I
Nice
assume
idea.
people will like the idea. That's one of the things I think we'll calendar for the next meeting coming up.
Great, thank you. And personnel did not meet. There are no agenda items at this point. There was one item that Bertrand brought up earlier, which we will take up when we meet next, which was the compensation level for firefighters. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Temporary advisory committee reports. Do we have any at this point? Don't think we do.
Just the summer festival, which has not
Right.
met, they're planning to meet in December to recap this year and plan for next year.
Right, great. Any general discussion?
I just want to bring up one item. As I mentioned to several of you, the state every other year holds a seminar, an invitation-only thing on the future of transportation. And the thing that was remarkable about what happened this week is the amount of electric vehicles and both electric vehicles, but electric trucks of every single category are available. So under the Air Board, there's a person responsible for the fleet rules, which we are subject to. So I talked with that guy in terms of what it's like to operate a fleet at 8,000 feet, and where do you find a vehicle that you can put a snow blower on front of, et cetera. That's about the size of a Chevy Bolt. And so he seemed quite intrigued by it. So I suggested that maybe there's a way that we could be a test site for some of these things. I'm trying to do two things. One is to get early experience on electric commercial vehicles, but also being able to get some of those maybe paid for by other people. And if they work out, we keep them, and if not, we don't. So I do think there's an opportunity to team up with the state and try to make sure the fleet rules don't harm us, and maybe even save us some money.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. Any other general discussion items? If not, I will adjourn this meeting. Our next scheduled meeting is November 13th at 8 a.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Go Giants.